blue aura explodes from the sword our protagonist is holding. The crowd freezes. That's an aura sword, a technique only S-rank hunters can pull off. But this guy is only D-rank. Kang Shin-hyuk stops holding back and unleashes a wave of energy that swallows the entire arena. Our protagonist warns him to take this seriously. The vice principal drops his cocky stance instantly. He gets into a real fighting position. The entire arena goes dead silent. As the blade comes crashing down, Kang Shin-hyuk explains this martial art was created by one of his master's closest friends, and that friend was none other than the legendary Heavenly Demon. While every hunter in this world trained mana, this guy learned real martial arts from the strongest swordsman who ever lived. But before any of this, he wasn't a hunter or a fighter. He was just a broke 29-year-old writer who couldn't even make rent. On top of everything, the comment section for his novel was a total mess. Readers were telling him to just quit, but in his head, he told them to just shut up and read, insisting it was all part of the plan. He couldn't believe people thought writing was easy. His desk was a mess, just like his life. It felt like every day was just another struggle that wore him down. He sighed, realizing it wasn't the reader's fault. He was just so tired. He started wishing he could just get transported into one of his stories and have an easy life. That's when he felt something drip from his nose. Suddenly, someone was holding out a box of tissues for him. He took one, confused, but grateful. But when he looked up, he wasn't in his room anymore. He was standing in some kind of grand old hall. A man in strange robes read from a scroll. He announced Min Chan's name, his job as a web novel author, and his cause of passing, overwork. The figure introduced himself as Yamaraja, though Min Chan would probably know him by a different name, King Yeomra. And with a dead serious look, the king welcomed him to hell. Min Chan couldn't believe what he was hearing. Yamaraja confirmed that Min Chan had just passed away, but he told him not to feel too bad about it, because he was actually a very lucky man. Min Chan scoffed. He told the king that luck was the one thing he'd never had in his entire life. But Yamaraja just repeated himself, insisting that he was lucky. Turns out, there was a very specific reason. Min Chan was the 7,777,777th soul to arrive in the afterlife. It was a winning number, and as a prize for hitting this incredible number, the king announced he would grant him one wish. Min Chan was completely overwhelmed. He tried to explain how sudden this all was, since he was just trying to meet a deadline moments ago. Yamaraja clarified that absurd wishes, like becoming a god, were not allowed. But the king wasn't interested in waiting. His eyes glowed with a terrifying light, and Min Chan immediately understood that this was not a being you kept waiting. Panicked, Min Chan blurted out the first thing that came to his mind. He asked to live in the world of a novel, dreaming of things like harem adventures. Yamaraja seemed interested. He asked if Min Chan had a specific novel in mind, but then added a condition. He couldn't choose a novel he wrote himself. Min Chan was stunned. It was like the king knew exactly what he'd been planning. He kicked himself for not thinking of it sooner. He should have chosen a novel he wrote himself. But then, an idea hit him. He thought about a novel he'd read. He couldn't remember every single detail, but he knew the plot. More importantly, he knew the protagonist lived a pretty comfortable life. With his mind made up, he announced his choice. Yamaraja seemed entertained by the request. He told Min Chan that since it was such an amusing wish, he'd grant him 2 extra small favors as a special service. Min Chan couldn't believe his luck. He immediately used his first favor, asking to be sent to a point 2 years before the main story was set to begin. He remembered the novel clearly. The main plot kicked off when the protagonist started high school. But before that, the protagonist had a rough time in middle school, acting like a troublemaker. By arriving early, he figured he could fix that reputation before it became a problem. Yamaraja agreed to the terms, telling him to go and live a happy life. Then he asked what Min Chan wanted to do with his last remaining wish. He had one last wish to make. Instead of power or money, he yelled out that he just wanted to be handsome. He got really specific, pleading for perfect features, to be made unbelievably handsome. And just like that, his soul was sent on its way. Yamaraja watched him go, commenting on what a peculiar soul he was. His attendant agreed it was definitely unexpected. He supposed that good looks could be a kind of skill, but it was still a surprise. Usually, people in this situation have a very different request. He explained that most people ask to take over the main character's body, replacing the protagonist's soul with their own. A system window popped up, confirming the transfer. Lee Min Chan was being sent into the world of the novel, and it all felt like a dream. He opened his eyes. Now in his new body, the transfer was complete. He slowly realized that he had actually passed away. A system window appeared, confirming that Lee Min Chan's soul was now inside the body of someone named Kang Shin-hyuk. His mind raced. Kang Shin-hyuk? That name didn't sound right. The main character of the novel he read was named Lee Ji-seong. He couldn't figure it out. Who the hell was Kang Shin-hyuk? Just then, the system began loading the memories of his new body, and the information flooded his mind. The memories started to play out. In this world, kids with hunter talent were discovered at age 10. Anyone with a decent score on the aptitude test got to go to a special hunter school. But Kang Shin-hyuk never even got that chance. He was an orphan, and the director of his orphanage secretly hid the tests from all the children. The director then lied on the official reports, claiming every child had the lowest possible aptitude. Because of that, they were all sent to normal schools, their futures as hunters stolen from them. Years later, the law changed, and he finally got to take the test. He scored in the top 15%, but by then, it was too late. He was too old to transfer into a hunter school. So after graduating, he started working as a porter, carrying gear for other hunters. He had to awaken his powers the hard way, eventually becoming a hunter and joining a guild on his own. A system message appeared, explaining that to prevent his mind from breaking, Kang Shin-hyuk's memories would only unlock when needed. He clutched his head, realizing this new body's life was just as unlucky as his own. The feeling slowly settled in. He hadn't just been tricked. He'd been completely scammed. He thought it was obvious. If you asked to be sent to a novel, you become the main character. But the memories that just surfaced told him a very different and much worse story. He finally remembered who Kang Shin-hyuk was. He wasn't the hero. He was the swordsmanship teacher for the class next to the protagonists. He was an extra among extras, a character with almost no presence in the story. It was so ridiculous. He wished he'd just asked to be sent to heaven instead. He desperately wanted to go back and argue with the King of Hell, but the only way to get there was to die again, and he knew killing himself would just land him in a much worse place. He was stuck. As he processed everything, he finally began to wake up to his new reality. A final message from the King of Hell popped up, wishing him good luck. That was the last straw. He screamed at the empty air, demanding to be changed back, but it was useless. He was trapped in a nightmare, begging to be changed back. He shot up in bed, covered in sweat. It wasn't a dream. This was real. Just then, a phone started ringing. He realized with a sinking feeling that it was for him. He picked it up. The person on the other end was from the Chase Guild's finance team, and they asked to speak with Kang Shin-hyuk. That was it. He really was in Kang Shin-hyuk's body. The caller continued, explaining they were just confirming the payment of his severance package. They told him to call back if there were any problems. He barely managed to agree before they hung up. A moment later, a text came through from the bank. It was a deposit notification for over 38 million won from the Chase Guild, but it was the total balance that made his eyes go wide. He had over 300 million won. He couldn't believe it. He just stared at the number, counting the zeros in his head. It was an amount of money he couldn't even process at first. And just like that, something snapped. All the complaining and despair just vanished. He threw his arms open to the morning sun. He made a decision. From that day forward, he was Kang Shin-hyuk. He realized that even if the original Kang Shin-hyuk's life wasn't perfect, being a hunter meant having serious money. To some, 300 million won might not be a big deal, but for him, a third-rate author who literally worked himself to death just to get by, it was everything. It was a dreamlike amount of money he'd never seen in his entire life. He decided right then there was no point in complaining anymore. Sure, there were monsters, portals, and hunters, but at the end of the day, this was still modern-day South Korea. And in this new life, he was only 25 years old. He had over 300 million won in the bank, and that wasn't even the best part. He took a moment to look at his reflection. He was ridiculously handsome, and he thought it was the best thing ever. He had a lot going for him. Youth, good looks, decent abilities, and wealth. But he knew that in the grand scheme of things, B-class hunters like him were a dime a dozen. He remembered that the novel's protagonist was from a super rich family, making his own wealth look small. He figured a side character like him would eventually be forgotten as the main story ramped up. The idea of being a character who had almost no impact on the story's progression, that was actually perfect for him. He started thinking about the novel. I became the delinquent underachiever of Hunter School. Turns out, it actually had two protagonists. There was the novel's original hero, Kim Do-hyun, and then there was Lee Ji-seong, a guy who was transported into the body of the story's rich troublemaker. The thing about Lee Ji-seong was that he actively used his knowledge of the original plot. He would seek out all the fated opportunities meant for the original hero and take them for himself. On top of that, he used his family's wealth to consume all sorts of powerful elixirs. By monopolizing opportunities and doping with items, he managed to catch up to the original protagonist's talent. He knew his starting point was totally different from the two protagonists. He didn't need to compete with them, and honestly, he was no match for them anyway. There was no reason to even try to measure up. The only reason he ever wanted to be a protagonist was to live a comfortable life, and that meant his dream of a simple life, working a bit, playing a lot, and eating well, was finally possible. He just had to wait. Someday, just like in the original story, the portals would go crazy and a world crisis would begin. That's when the two heroes, Kim Do-hyun and Lee Ji-seong, would have to join forces to stop a massive army. He pictured himself in the crowd, wondering if those kids could really protect the world. All anyone could do was believe in them. They were the world's last hope. The only job for everyone else was to cheer them on from the sidelines. He could see it now. The whole world cheering for Lee Ji-seong and Kim Do-hyun to save them. That was the plan. He would just be another face in the crowd. He could see it all perfectly. The whole world would be screaming for the heroes to save them. Lee Ji-seong and Kim Do-hyun would be their only hope, and he'd just be sitting there, watching it all unfold on his phone. A huge grin spread across his face. Yeah, that was the life. He could give a little cheer from the sidelines. That was more than enough for him. A message popped up on his phone, officially confirming his new job as a swordsmanship instructor. He could see his future laid out perfectly. A comfortable life without any money worries. It felt like he'd just won the lottery. With his future secure, a creepy grin spread across his face. He decided that until the day the portals went crazy, he would just live quietly and stick to the original story. It was his first day of work. In the novel, Kang Shin-hyuk was a B-class hunter who quit to become a swordsmanship instructor at the elite Hunter Academy. Fortunately, the timing of his arrival was perfect. He had been transported into this world right after the original Kang Shin-hyuk had quit the Chase Guild and was about to start his new job at the school. He had some free time before starting, so he decided to dig into the life of the man he now was. He went through everything he could find: bank statements, contacts, personal IDs. But as he looked through everything, he realized something was seriously wrong. Turns out, the original Kang Shin-hyuk's social life was a complete disaster. The guy was a total outcast. He thought about his own past life, where he mostly just stayed home and wrote. But this was on another level. The phone only had 2 saved numbers. It was like this guy had intentionally cut himself off from the entire world. He remembered someone taunting him as another person walked away. He clenched his fist, getting angry just thinking about some ungrateful person from his past. He let out a long, in his past life, he had to give up on so many things. Dating and marriage were the biggest ones. He used to tell people he preferred being alone, but that was just nonsense. There were a lot of reasons, like family issues and his stressful job. He was just a third-rate author who could barely support himself. Dating was out of the question. It was just completely unthinkable. But things were different now. He wasn't the protagonist he'd wished for, but he'd still been given a lot. He decided that he was going to experience everything he couldn't in the past, one by one. Without another thought, he reached for the door. The next day, he walked into the teacher's office at the academy. He stood tall and introduced himself as Kang Shin-hyuk, the new first-year swordsmanship instructor. The room went quiet. For a moment, nobody said a thing. He immediately felt a little embarrassed, wondering if he'd been too loud or formal. Then, one of the teachers stood up. He introduced himself as Park Yeon-suk and welcomed Shin-hyuk, pointing him to an empty desk. Shin-hyuk smiled back, relieved. He thanked him and said he was looking forward to working together. That's when 2 other teachers peeked over a cubicle wall. They were whispering about how handsome he was, joking that he looked more like an actor than a teacher. He just laughed it off. He knew this face was basically the one good thing he got in exchange for his entire past life. Then, the friendly tone changed. One of the men asked which guild he came from. Shin-hyuk replied that he was part of the Chase Guild before he was hired here. The teachers were immediately impressed. They knew the Chase Guild was a big deal, and they thought it was cool that someone so young had that kind of experience. Shin-hyuk was loving the praise. He felt a wave of relief, thinking he was finally being accepted by his new coworkers. Even another teacher chimed in, saying the school had finally hired some real talent. He walked over and introduced himself as Jong Hyun-sik, the second-year spearmanship instructor. He also mentioned that he was from the Hwarang Guild and a graduate of the 6th Hunter School. With that out of the way, Jong Hyun-sik got right to the point. He asked Shin-hyuk which hunter school he graduated from, joking that someone so good-looking must have been famous. Before Shin-hyuk could even answer, the others started guessing. They threw out names of different hunter schools, completely sure he had to be from one of them. One of the women thought hard, saying she'd definitely know him if he was from her school. The whole group was waiting for his answer. Shin-hyuk just smiled calmly and dropped the bomb. He told them he didn't graduate from a hunter school at all. The friendly mood in the room vanished instantly. The teachers were completely confused. One of them didn't believe it was possible to become a hunter without graduating from a hunter school. She started guessing he must have been educated abroad or had dual citizenship. Shin-hyuk just smiled and calmly corrected her. He explained that he was a native Korean and that there were, in fact, hunters who didn't come from their elite schools. He then confirmed that he was one of those cases. The friendly mood in the room instantly died. The green-haired teacher's face went cold. The room went completely quiet. The green-haired teacher finally spoke, looking annoyed. He told Shin-hyuk he should have just said so from the start. He announced he was going for a smoke before the morning assembly, calling the whole conversation a waste of time. Then he invited Jong Hyun-sik to come with him. The other teachers started talking trash right in front of him. One complained that he only got the job because of some quota for non-graduates, calling the whole thing ridiculous. Shin-hyuk was stunned by their open disrespect. As he stood there, a blue window suddenly appeared in front of him. The system was detecting his unease. The system began loading Kang Shin-hyuk's memories, explaining the history behind the teacher's attitude. It all started with the hunter factor test. This was the most accurate way to confirm if someone had the potential to be a hunter. The test kit used monster fluids and cost a fortune, 100,000 won per test. He remembered a scandal where a corrupt director was arrested. Because of that, Shin-hyuk, who had left an orphanage, got a chance to be retested. But that was just the start of the problem. People like Shin-hyuk, who didn't go to a hunter school, never got the same systematic training as the graduates. This created a huge gap in ability, which led to widespread discrimination. So, those from non-hunter backgrounds fought back, and eventually, the Anti-Non-Hunter Discrimination Act was passed. The law was supposed to make hiring fair by hiding an applicant's background, but some places just created a separate quota to hire non-graduates for lower-level jobs, so that the whole situation became a mess. Instead of fixing the problem, the law actually made the hatred from hunter school graduates even worse. They felt like they were the ones being treated unfairly now. The system gave him a final piece of advice. Don't tell anyone he wasn't from a hunter school. Shin-hyuk was frustrated. That was information he could have used a lot earlier. He understood why the graduates were angry, but it still felt unfair. He'd never been part of any protests or signed petitions, so he was being judged for something he didn't even do. One of the other teachers seemed to feel bad for him. He tried to calm Shin-hyuk down, saying he must be upset on his first day and that this was just how things were right now. All Shin-hyuk wanted was a comfortable retirement, so he decided to just put up with it. He told the teacher he understood why the others would see him as the enemy, but the teacher looked completely confused by that. He didn't understand what Shin-hyuk was talking about when he mentioned a quota for non-graduates. Shin-hyuk asked if he was hired because of some special treatment. The teacher was shocked by the question. He explained that Shin Hyuk wasn't some charity case. He had passed the exam and was personally scouted for the job. The teacher kept going, making it clear this wasn't a regular school. There were no quotas or bonus points for non-graduates. Nothing like that existed here. It turns out the other teachers had it all wrong. They were treating him like he was given a handout, but the truth was completely different. The other teachers were gossiping. They figured the school must be short on money to hire someone like him through a quota, and they felt bad for the students who got stuck with him. One of them tried to make sense of it, saying it was probably fine since he was only teaching the basics. He figured the school must have put him with the first years for a reason. The conversation shifted. One of the women admitted he was at least good looking, but the other just scoffed. She said a decent face didn't mean anything if he had no real skills. Their assumptions got worse. They guessed he was probably from an orphanage if he didn't go to a hunter school. They called him a waste, a good face with no foundation. One of them decided she needed to give the students a heads up. She was going to tell them to find a separate swordsmanship tutor. After all, being a hunter was a life-threatening job. She thought who knows what could happen if they learned from a quack like him. Just then, a voice came from behind her. It was Kang Shin Hyuk. The teacher froze, completely stunned, and asked how he got there. He smiled and explained that Mr. Park had told him this was the smoking area. Then he looked at them all and said he thought there had been a misunderstanding. He asked if they had a moment to talk before the morning assembly. The teacher was furious that he'd overheard their conversation. She tried to keep a straight face, but she was clearly pissed off. He told them he was worried their misunderstanding would spread to the students. He made it clear he didn't get the job through some special quota for not attending a hunter school. He finished by saying he just wanted to clear the air and looked forward to working with them. But the teachers just stared back, completely unconvinced. That's when one of the other teachers, a guy named Jong, spoke up. He told Shin Hyuk that he was the one who was misunderstanding things. He explained that they didn't care if he got in through a quota, points, or because he knew someone. That wasn't why they were acting this way. The real issue, he said, was that Shin Hyuk hadn't been properly taught at a hunter school. He told him to stop trying to cozy up to them. Then he just turned and walked away, telling Shin Hyuk to stay quiet and not stand out. He even suggested he go hang out with the general subject teachers, basically telling him he wasn't one of them. As they left, one of the women commented on how mean Jong was. She wondered if Shin Hyuk was at least a B-class hunter, but the other just assumed he must have pulled some trick to get that rank. Shin Hyuk just stood there, taking it all in. Jong then looked at Shin Hyuk with a smug grin. He told him that if he was really so unhappy, he should apply for a duel of honor. He added that he had his A-class promotion evaluation coming up. He suggested it might be less embarrassing for Shin Hyuk to lose to him after he was officially A-class. And that's when it clicked for Shin Hyuk. This was why the original Kang Shin Hyuk from the novel had been such an outcast. This whole situation reminded him of his past life. He remembered writing a story he was really proud of, thinking he was finally going to debut as an author. But the person he showed it to just shot him down. He was told it was good work for a regular person, but that he couldn't compete with people who went to proper schools. He was advised to forget about debuting and just keep writing as a hobby. He was even warned that making it his profession would only make him hate it. The next year, someone else debuted with the exact same story. His work was instantly labeled a copycat, and his dream was completely destroyed. He'd almost forgotten that the original Kang Shin Hyuk was also a pretty unlucky guy. Looking back, this new life wasn't much different from his old one at all. He clenched his fist. He realized that a stable life meant nothing if he had to live like this. Just as Jong was walking away, Shin Hyuk called out and told him to wait. Jong turned back and asked what he wanted. Shin Hyuk told himself he just had to step up this one time. He looked right at him and accepted the challenge. He would do the duel of honor. It was a risk, but it was all for the sake of the comfortable future he wanted. The other teachers couldn't believe it. One of them turned and asked if he was serious. Mr. Jung just smirked. He told Shin Hyuk that if he was just trying to save face in front of the women, he'd let him back down this one time. But Shin Hyuk was completely serious. He looked right at him and said they were going to have a duel of honor. In this world, a duel of honor is how hunters settle their arguments. The winner decides everything. Normally, refusing a challenge is a huge disgrace, but you can get away with it if the duel doesn't make sense, or one person is obviously in the wrong. Shin Hyuk made his case to all of them. He said that since they were treating him this way, just because of his background, he had no choice but to prove himself with the duel Jung had suggested. He even taunted Jung, saying it was fine if he was scared and wanted to wait until after his promotion. That's when Jung snapped, asking if Shin Hyuk had ever even fought in an honor duel before. His face twisted into a nasty grin. He reminded Shin Hyuk that while it's called an honor duel, everything except killing is allowed. He made it clear that any injuries Shin Hyuk suffered would be his own fault. Shin Hyuk was completely calm. Mr. Jung, on the other hand, was furious. He sneered, asking if Shin Hyuk was only acting tough because he taught spear fighting. He set the time and place right then and there. The duel would be in 1 week at the spear training ground. He even made the 2 other teachers act as official witnesses. One of the teachers told him she didn't know why he was so confident. She warned him he'd better start looking for a new job. With that, Shin Hyuk just turned and walked away. After that whole mess, the rest of the day was a total blur. The next morning, he introduced himself to his class. The students seemed to really look up to him. His biggest worry worry had been teaching the sword fighting class. But strangely, the moment he picked up a sword, that worry completely disappeared. It was like the memories of the original Kang Shin-hyuk were coming back to him. All the knowledge about swordsmanship just naturally flowed into his body. He demonstrated the moves for the students, showing them how simple it all was. Turns out, he was a natural. The first-year class was simple, just basic swordsmanship and physical training. But that wasn't the hard part of his new job. When he introduced himself to the afternoon class, the mood was totally different. The students looked at him like he was a dead man walking. One of the students asked if it was true he was dueling the spear instructor next week. He sighed. The rumor had already spread everywhere. The students were already talking about it. They figured the outcome was so obvious that the other teachers must have spread the rumor themselves. One of them worriedly asked how he could possibly win against an elite hunter. He just smiled and told them not to get scared by titles like elite. He said what really mattered was having an unbreakable spirit. He then admitted that the rumors were true. He was a sword instructor who didn't come from a hunter school. Then, with a serious look, he confessed that he wasn't confident at all, not even a little bit. He clarified that he was confident he was going to lose. His expression was wild, and it completely threw everyone for a loop. He told them they'd see the result next week, so they should just focus on class. The students were completely stunned. He knew this was a bit of a mind game, but he wasn't entirely faking it. Later that day, Kang Shin-hyuk wasn't at the academy. He was at a bus station, buying a ticket to a place called Daejelingyang. The bus was about to leave, so he hurried to get on. Turns out, some of that crazy confidence he showed in class was real. As he sat on the bus, he knew he was at a turning point. He had a feeling that after tonight, everything was going to be different. He was sick of being looked down on just because he didn't have a hunter school background. If elite education was what they respected, then he'd just have to get one himself, and he knew exactly where to find it. He was about to steal the first major power-up that was meant for the novel's main character. It was a book containing the legacy of a powerful master. This was the perfect opportunity to take. If it had been a rare medicine or a magic item, someone would have noticed it was gone. But a hidden legacy like this was a different story. He tried to justify it to himself. Even the original protagonist in the novel had stolen someone else's opportunity. Besides, it wasn't like a secret technique would wear out just from being looked at. His goal wasn't to save the world anyway. He didn't need to become as strong as the main character. He just needed to be strong enough to win the duel. And there it was, right in front of him. This was the first major opportunity in the novel. Beyond that portal was a hidden legacy, an internal cultivation method and its teachings. Without a second thought, he ran straight for it. He felt a strange sensation as he passed through the glowing light. When he opened his eyes, he was somewhere else entirely. He was stunned. The original novel never described this place. It was a breathtaking view, a snowy landscape he never knew existed in Korea. He snapped himself out of it. This wasn't the time to admire the view. He had to find the martial arts legacy and get out of there fast. But then, a dark figure appeared right behind him. Before he could even react, he was sent flying. He crashed into the snow. He was sent flying. He crashed into the snow, completely caught off guard. A figure in white robes appeared before him. He commented that Shin-hyuk had managed to avoid his first move, calling him no ordinary human. The man demanded to know his name and where he was from, asking how he had entered this place. Shin-hyuk was stunned. The man was speaking Chinese, but he understood every word. Turns out, the original Kang Shin-hyuk knew the language. He carefully explained that he was a teacher at the South Korean Hunter Academy, and that he had entered through a portal. The old man just stared at him. He said Shin-hyuk's words were complete nonsense. Things like South Korea and Hunter Academy meant nothing to him. Shin-hyuk pointed to the glowing gate he came through, asking if the elder couldn't see the giant white door. But the man just said the only white thing he saw was the endless snow. He said he couldn't even remember how long he'd been stuck there. He'd lost count of the days, more than 30 years ago. This wasn't what Shin-hyuk expected at all. He came for a hidden technique, not some powerful old man. But then, a crazy idea hit him. He carefully asked if the elder's name was Cho-yu-ryang. The old man seemed surprised, wondering how anyone could still remember his name. Shin-hyuk knew exactly who he was. He carefully asked if the elder's name was Cho-yu-ryang. The old man seemed surprised, wondering how anyone could still remember his name. Shin-hyuk knew exactly who he was. He remembered it all from the old man seemed surprised, wondering how anyone could still remember his name. Shin-hyuk knew exactly who he was. He remembered it all from the book. The person who left behind the powerful martial arts that the novel's hero was supposed to find was this man. But this was completely wrong. In the original story, the protagonist only found a stone tablet. The message left on it said that Cho-yu-ryang had already become an immortal and left this world. He wasn't supposed to be here. And then it hit him. He remembered his exact wish, to be sent back 2 years before the novel started. This changed everything. He realized he had arrived before Cho-yu-ryang was supposed to have left the world. Now he had to come up with a good story, because telling him he read it in a book was not an option. Shin-hyuk started his lie, saying he'd heard an old story about him. The elder, Cho-yu-ryang, seemed interested and told him to continue. He told the legend of a great swordsman who fought a huge, terrifying beast that was hurting people across the land. Shin-hyuk finished by saying the hero in the story looked exactly like him. A small smile appeared on Cho-yu-ryang's face, pleased that someone remembered the battle. It worked. He had just pieced together the story from what he remembered in the novel, and the old man bought it. He could tell the elder had a immense pride in his skills, and he had just played right into it. So he decided to go with the most respectful approach he could think of. He bowed low, his head touching the snowy ground. He pleaded with the elder, explaining that he came here seeking a true master of martial arts. He swore he wasn't an evil person and begged the old man to put away his sword and guide him. Chu Yu Riang was not impressed. He called Shin Hyuk's request ridiculous and flat out refused to train him. He told him to leave, saying he'd at least spare his life. But as the old master started to walk away, Shin Hyuk mentioned a spear. That one word made Chu Yu Riang stop in his tracks. The elder listened, his expression unreadable. Shin Hyuk quickly explained that he had a duel coming up. His opponent uses a spear. Chu Yu Riang looked down at him. He asked a simple question. Between a sword and a spear, which one wins? The answer was clear. The spear had better reach and more destructive power. With proper training, it was simply the superior weapon. Shin Hyuk was stunned. He couldn't believe a master swordsman would admit that so easily. Chu Yu Riang told him to leave now that he had his answer. But as he turned to go, he realized Shin Hyuk wasn't moving. Shin Hyuk knew he couldn't let him walk away now. Shin Hyuk yelled that he wouldn't have come all this way just to leave because he was told to, but then his whole attitude changed. He started talking to himself, saying that he was right all along. A sword just can't beat a spear. He muttered that with a duel coming up next week, his only option was to go home and practice begging for mercy. He even started planning the details, wondering if he should wet himself as a sign of complete surrender. He'd tell his opponent that his sword was nothing more than a toothpick compared to a mighty spear. That's when Chu Yu Riang finally stopped. He said that was just a story about normal swords and spears. He looked back with a deadly serious expression and said that his sword tears dragons apart. He told Shin Hyuk that comparing weapons like that in front of him was an insult worthy of death. But he was impressed by his resolve and agreed to give him special help. And just like that, it worked. His whole pathetic act had been a complete success. He quickly thanked Chu Yu Riang, then immediately asked what kind of special help he was talking about. Shin Hyuk started guessing, maybe a hidden technique or some rare medicine, but Chu Yu Riang just looked annoyed by his suggestions. The old master told him there was something much better. Then without any warning, he blasted Shin Hyuk with a wave of energy, making him scream in pain. Shin Hyuk collapsed, complaining that it felt like he was being beaten with a hot club. Chu Yu Riang explained that for a martial artist, Shin Hyuk had no chi in his core at all. He told him he had just injected a small amount of vital yang energy directly into his body. He promised that in 4 days, his energy center would open, and within 6, he'd feel the changes. Chu Yu Riang said he didn't know how strong the spear user was, but with this new power, Shin Hyuk wouldn't have to worry about getting beaten by anyone, anywhere. Shin Hyuk was a bit stunned, wondering if that was really all there was to it. Before he could ask, Chu Yu Riang gave him one last order: win the duel, and then come back. The old master explained that he couldn't leave this place. He had one final command for Shin Hyuk when he returned to his own world. He was told to make it known that the sword is the strongest weapon. A week later, at the spear training ground, the duel was about to begin. Mr. Jung's voice echoed through the hall, mocking Shin Hyuk for actually showing up. He asked if he'd spent the week looking for a new job. Shin Hyuk was done with the trash talk. He told him to shut up so they could start. His opponent just laughed, finding the whole situation ridiculous. Mr. Jung smugly offered to let Shin Hyuk have the first attack. He added that for a spear user, going second was actually an advantage. Shin Hyuk accepted the offer. He could feel how light his body was now, a sure sign that he'd gotten stronger. He knew this power-up alone probably wasn't enough to win, but it was a start. He decided that even if he ended up crippled from this fight, it was worth it. He was done living a life where everyone else pushed him around. With everything he had, he lunged forward. The strike landed with incredible force. Mr. Jung's body just buckled. His eyes went white, and a tooth flew out of his mouth. The entire crowd was stunned into silence. No one could believe what they were seeing. Mr. Jung hit the ground hard, but even Shin Hyuk looked confused, as if he had no idea where that power came from. The referee finally snapped out of it and raised his hand. The duel was over. Kang Shin Hyuk had won. Panic erupted as everyone realized how badly hurt Mr. Jung was. People started yelling for an ambulance, for a stretcher. That's when Shin Hyuk remembered the old master's words. He'd promised that in a few days, his body would change, and that he wouldn't get beaten up anymore. But this wasn't a good feeling. He clenched his fist, shaking with anger. He couldn't believe what that crazy old man had done to his body. He remembered how the novel's original hero, Lee Ji-seong, had gotten so powerful. The guy learned martial arts and basically drank magic potions like they were water. He looked down at his hand, realizing his new power was way beyond anything he'd expected. That's when someone shouted his name. It was Mr. Park, another teacher. He ran over, frantically asking if Shin Hyuk was okay. Shin Hyuk asked if he saw the fight. Mr. Park was practically glowing, saying it was so amazing he couldn't even follow the movement. Shin Hyuk realized that to the other teachers, he must have looked like a blur. He could see the relief on Mr. Park's face, guessing he must have been dealing with a lot of stress from the other side. As the medics carried Mr. Jung away on a stretcher, Mr. Park was just happy Shin Hyuk was safe. He was so thrilled, he announced he was treating everyone to celebrate. Mr. Jung glared from the stretcher as he was carried out. Meanwhile, the other teachers were already getting excited about the free food. More teachers chimed in, eager to join, but the mood soured a bit when one of them started collecting money for the bill. The celebration party was even wilder than the fight. Everyone was cheering and drinking, completely letting loose. The night just kept going, from singing his lungs out at karaoke to finally passing out on a couch. He didn't make it home until 4 in the morning, completely wasted. For a normal person, a terrible hangover would be next. But for Shin Hyuk, something inside him started to glow. His body was cleaning itself out. Turns out, the old master had given him physical abilities way beyond anything he had wished for. Waking up without even a hint of a hangover, he knew what he had to do. He had to go back to the one who made his body this way. So he made his way back through the snowy forest, heading straight for that glowing portal. He felt like he owed the old man his life. The least he could do was give his thanks. He stepped back into the portal. The world inside was just as he remembered. Nothing but snow and trees as far as he could see. He remembered the old man saying he couldn't leave this place. It was a harsh, lonely world with not a single animal in sight. And then he saw him. The old master was sitting there, waiting. He looked up and simply said that Shin Hyuk was back. The master, Chu Yuryang, didn't waste any time. He immediately asked if Shin Hyuk had defeated the spear user. Shin Hyuk grinned, telling him of course he won. He boasted that he took the guy down in a single hit. But Chu Yuryang just figured the spear user must have been weaker than he thought. Shin Hyuk quickly corrected him, explaining that the spear user was actually very skilled. That's why he'd come back. He needed to know something. He asked what exactly the old man had done to his body. Chu Yuryang just shrugged it off, saying he'd only opened his energy center a little, just enough so he wouldn't get beaten up anymore. Then the master's eyes lit up. He said he was bored and told Shin Hyuk to come over and tell him the whole story of the fight. Shin Hyuk was completely caught off guard by the request, and then it hit him. Martial arts. That was the reason he'd become so strong. He couldn't believe he'd missed it. Chu Yuryang's technique was the first major power-up in the novel. The original hero had to train hard to open his energy center, but Shin Hyuk just had it done for him by a grandmaster. Shin Hyuk interrupted, telling the elder that he'd never actually learned any martial arts. Chu Yuryang just stared back, asking what he was talking about. The master explained that even though his energy center was closed, he could sense a small amount of internal energy inside him. He figured it must have built up on its own from all his sword fighting. Chu Yuryang called it a foolish method. He assumed Shin Hyuk had probably mistaken the mana that hunters use for real internal energy. Trying to understand, Shin Hyuk asked the elder what country he came from. Chu Yuryang answered that it was the Ming dynasty during the reign of the Hongwu emperor. Suddenly, it all made sense. Chu Yuryang wasn't from the distant past. He was from a completely different world. That's why he knew nothing about hunters or how their powers worked. Shin Hyuk had heard the name before. He knew the legends about the swordsman Chu Yuryang, but he never could have guessed this was the truth. Shin Hyuk decided to just tell him. He explained that in the outside world, martial arts no longer exist. The old master looked completely stunned. He told the elder that a lot of time had passed. A different kind of power had appeared, and martial arts just faded away. It was a much better excuse than trying to explain he was from another dimension. Chu Yuryang seemed to accept it. He looked down sadly, saying that time gets blurry when you're stuck in one place. He figured much more time had passed than he'd realized. Seeing how lonely he looked, Shin Hyuk tried to cheer him up. He told him not to worry, that someone named Ji Seong Lee would carry on his legacy. Then he offered him some healthy food from the outside world. The old master took the packet and tried it. His eyes shot open in disbelief. He looked horrified. He asked if some kind of plague had broken out in the world, forcing the poor to eat such terrible things to stay healthy. He went on about how even beggars in his time ate 50-year-old wild ginseng. Shin Hyuk just stared, thinking to himself how annoying this old man was. Not giving up, Shin Hyuk reached into his bag again. He asked if the elder liked sweet food. The old master just scoffed, asking if he looked like a child who'd enjoy sweets. Shin Hyuk pulled out a chocolate bar, telling the old master it was a sweet treat from his world. He explained that it was especially good when it was cold. Skeptical, the elder decided to give it a try. The moment he tasted it, his eyes went wide. He was completely overwhelmed. The old master started coughing loudly, trying to regain his composure. Shin Hyuk just watched, feeling incredibly awkward. After clearing his throat, Chu Yuryang tried to play it cool. He declared the chocolate was just edible and immediately demanded more. Turns out, he didn't just want one more. The old master had eaten everything. All the emergency food Shin Hyuk had brought was gone in an instant. Shin Hyuk was confused. He asked the elder how he'd been surviving all this time. Chu Yuryang explained that at his level, he didn't need food or drink to live. He just ate for the taste. The old man looked disappointed that the food was gone. Shin Hyuk was at his limit. He just wanted to go home. With the food gone, the old master turned his attention to what Shin Hyuk had told him. He confirmed that the Ming dynasty was now in ancient history. Shin Hyuk explained that the world was completely different now. Martial arts had disappeared, monsters were common, and people called hunters were the ones who fought them. The old master looked out at the endless snow. He'd been here so long he'd stopped counting the days. The elder realized that by opening Shin Hyuk's energy center, he had made him the only true martial artist left in the modern world. He reminded him of the huge difference in power between someone with this ability and everyone else. With that said, he turned to Shin Hyuk and asked him a simple question. What was he going to do with all that power? Shin Hyuk's answer was surprisingly simple. He just wanted to live a normal life. He even mumbled that the new energy was great for getting over hangovers. His mind started racing with all the practical uses. He could wake up early for stock trading, and his back wouldn't hurt after playing games for hours. To him, this power was just a tool for a comfortable life. The old master suddenly realized he'd been talking to this kid the whole time without even knowing who he was. He asked for his name, and the young man introduced himself as King Shin-hyuk. The old master looked at him, thinking it over. Shin-hyuk wasn't greedy. He had some talent, and he was a teacher. He seemed like someone who wouldn't do anything stupid with the power he'd been given. The elder then introduced himself as Cho-yu-ryang, the greatest swordsman in the world, a man who had fought dragons. Shin-hyuk just nodded, saying he was well aware of the legend. Cho-yu-ryang stood with his back to him, his presence filling the snowy clearing. That's when Shin-hyuk gave his own name. Then, the old master made a huge declaration. He told Shin-hyuk that he would accept him as his student. For a moment, Shin-hyuk just stared, saying nothing. His answer was blunt and immediate. He refused. Cho-yu-ryang was completely confused. He had to ask if he'd heard him right. Shin-hyuk just smiled and said he appreciated the offer, but he was fine. He explained that he never really wanted to become super strong. He was just grateful for the help and wanted to go back to living a normal life. The master couldn't believe it. He told Shin-hyuk that if he became his disciple, the world would be at his feet. But looking at him, he could see there wasn't a single bit of doubt in his eyes. With that, Cho-yu-ryang told him to go on. He had to prepare to ascend. Shin-hyuk was thrilled, saying it was an honor to meet him, and quickly tried to leave. But then, he heard the old master mutter that it was a shame he couldn't leave anything behind. The word ascension caught Shin-hyuk's attention. He wondered if this was the moment from the novel where the master was supposed to become immortal. His curiosity got the better of him. He called out and asked the master if ascension was real, if someone could really go to the realm of immortals by mastering martial arts or through enlightenment. The master explained that in his case, he was about to master martial arts completely, and since he had built up virtue by helping Shin-hyuk, he just needed a little more training to finally ascend. Then he added that it was nice not having to bother leaving behind any secret manuals. Shin-hyuk's face dropped. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. The old master looked at him sideways. He asked if Shin-hyuk was trying to get his secret techniques, but he just brushed it off. He reminded Shin-hyuk that martial arts had been forgotten in the outside world. There was no one left to read his secrets anyway. The master insisted that even if he wrote them down, no one would bother to train. That's when it hit Shin-hyuk. This wasn't how the story was supposed to go. He realized his presence had changed everything. If the old master didn't leave behind his secrets, then Lee Ji-sung, one of the novel's main heroes, would never get his lucky power-up. That meant Lee Ji-sung wouldn't be able to catch up to his rival, Kim Do-hyun. And with no real competition, Kim Do-hyun wouldn't feel the need to grow stronger either. The chain reaction would be catastrophic. In the end, without its heroes, this world would be destroyed. He thought he was just triggering a simple event from the novel. He had been way too naive. He quickly called out to Master Cho-yu-ryang, telling him to wait. He admitted he'd been too hasty and begged the master to accept him as his disciple. The old master was surprised by the sudden change. Shin-hyuk quickly explained that it would be a huge waste for the master's martial arts to be lost to time. He begged the master to accept him and pass down his techniques, but his real reason came out. He just wanted to use the power to live a comfortable life. The master called his eyes greedy, so Shin-hyuk came back with a good offer. He promised to bring lots of food every time he came to train. The master warned him that the training would be brutal. Shin-hyuk screamed his agreement, but inside, he was already mourning all his lost free time. Sometime later, back at the academy, everyone was talking about the duel. A swordsman from a non-hunter school had easily defeated an elite instructor, and the whole school was in an uproar. The teachers were gossiping about it in a group chat. One of them admitted that even though they couldn't cheer out loud, it felt great to see someone finally push back against the elite instructors. The duel had brought up the quiet tension between the practical and general subject teachers. That's why Mr. Park looked so happy that day. They even talked about the rumors of a quota for non-hunter school graduates. One of them confessed that they used to think those instructors were less skilled. Shin-hyuk was starting to change that perception. The other teachers were still talking about his duel. One of them said that watching him fight completely changed their opinion. They were even more impressed that he didn't ask for any reward after winning. They thought he was some great person with amazing character. The truth was, he just forgot to ask for a prize. But still, he was loving the respectful looks he was getting from everyone. This was exactly the kind of comfortable life he wanted. He figured he had a good routine planned out. He'd visit the old master every weekend and just focus on his normal life during the week. Or so he thought. The moment he walked into his classroom, he knew something was different. Every single student was standing at their desk, staring right at him. Suddenly, one of the students yelled for everyone to stand at attention. Shin-hyuk had a bad feeling about this. Then the whole class saluted him, yelling that they wouldn't give up. They were completely fired up. They all rushed his desk, excited. They'd heard all about the duel and how he didn't just win, he crushed his opponent. Shin-hyuk was baffled. He had no idea how they knew, since only staff were supposed to watch. The students were buzzing with questions. Turns out, they'd heard everything, and now they wanted the full story straight from him. Shin-hyuk just brushed them off, telling them to open their books. He was trying to get the class back to normal. He took a moment to himself, feeling genuinely happy. Unlike his past life, he now had a healthy body, a good job, and a predictable routine. This was the happiness he'd fought for, and he was going to hold on to it for the rest of his life. That feeling of peace lasted for about 4 hours. He was in the cafeteria line when he saw one of the other teachers arguing with the lunch staff. The teacher wanted more of a specific food item, but the server refused. The teacher got angry, demanding to know what the problem was. The server just glared back at him, not backing down. Then, the server slowly picked up the tongs and dropped one single, tiny sausage onto the teacher's tray. But then, The server gave him 2 extra sausages. Shin Hyuk was thrilled, feeling like it was his lucky day. Just as he was about to eat, someone sat down right across from him. He looked up, surprised, as a voice asked if he was Mr. Kang Shin Hyuk. It was a woman, holding a tray practically overflowing with sausages. She smiled and confirmed he was the swordsmanship teacher for the high school. He admitted that was him, but he was completely flustered. He started to ask how she knew about the sausages, then stopped himself and asked if he was supposed to know her. She just laughed at how awkward he was being. She told him to relax, then called him Senior Shin Hyuk. The word senior threw him for a loop. If this was someone the original Shin Hyuk knew, he should have some memory of her, but his mind was drawing a complete blank. She playfully asked if he really didn't recognize her, just because her looks had changed. Then she introduced herself. Her name was Seora. The name Seora rang a bell. Shin Hyuk tried to remember where he'd heard it before, then it hit him. He had a contact saved in his phone, Junior Seora. She smiled, confirming her full name was Choi Seora. She figured he didn't recognize her, because she looked so different now. He was completely stunned. The way she called him senior and the contact in his phone, it all started to make sense. He finally understood. The reason he couldn't remember her was because the original Kang Shin Hyuk was the one who knew her. His mind flashed back to the novel. Choi Seora wasn't just some random teacher. She was a central character in the 2nd volume. But that wasn't even the worst part. He remembered her true identity. She was a secret member of the international criminal group, Antagonist. Just then, a system message popped up, telling him the original Shin Hyuk's memories were being restored. A sharp pain shot through his head. This was the worst possible time for this to happen. As the memories flooded in, so did the information. Antagonist, or Antas, was an anti-hunter organization. They were known for killing countless hunters and were considered the enemy of the entire world. The system explained they were hard to catch because they operated in small, hidden groups. And here was a member, smiling at him like it was nothing. Sora noticed his expression and told him to calm down. She said it was perfectly safe here, using the old saying that it's always darkest, right under the lamp. But none of this made sense to Shin Hyuk. He was certain he'd read the entire novel, and there was never any mention of the original Kang Shin Hyuk being involved with Antas. That's when a new message from the system appeared, and it changed everything. A side story chapter had just been unlocked. It was going to record the story of Kang Shin Hyuk, the Antas assassin. He was shaking with anger. In his mind, he was screaming at the man whose body he now inhabited. He couldn't believe it. He furiously wondered what the hell the original Kang Shin Hyuk had been doing with his life to get mixed up in something this insane. He was sure he'd read the entire novel from start to finish. There was never a single mention of Kang Shin Hyuk being a member of Antas. But then, a thought hit him. He remembered that after the novel ended, the author had talked about writing a side story. It was supposed to reveal details that weren't in the main plot. Just then, the system confirmed it. A side story about someone named Hang Shin Hyuk was now available. He knew he had to see it immediately. He grunted as a sharp pain shot through his head. The system announced it was retrieving the memories of Hang Shin Yu, an assassin, or Antas. The memories began to play. Back in his guild days, the original Shin Yu had a companion named Him Chang-soo. He was the one who had rescued him from a bad orphanage. The memory jumped forward. 2 years ago, they were coming back from a mission when a nearby portal suddenly went out of control. A flood of monsters poured out, heading straight for them. The memory showed Shin Yu and his companion, Chang-soo, facing a group of terrifying monsters. They had called for backup, but the guild was stretched thin. No one was coming to help. Chang-soo reached out his hand. To Shin Yu, Chang-soo was more than a friend. He was the older brother he'd known since the orphanage, the only family he had, and on that day, Shin Yu lost him. The memory of his funeral was still sharp. After it was all over, the guild's response was simple. They said they didn't have the resources to help and had to sacrifice a few to save the many. But Shin Yu knew that was a lie. The real reason was because he and Chang-soo didn't come from a hunter school. They were outsiders, and the guild had always treated them that way. He was completely done with the guild. He applied for a deployment overseas, just to get away from it all. He spent a year in China before returning home. As he was planning to finally quit the guild, his senior, Choi Seora, found him. She had a different suggestion for him. Join Antas. It all started to make sense. He couldn't believe that a side character, like the original Kang Shin Hyuk, had such a complicated backstory. The memory continued. The original Shin Hyuk joined Antas that very day. After that, he sent half of his income to Seora as a donation. The current Shin Hyuk thought this was insane. Turns out, the original Shin Hyuk had confessed to Seora once, but she rejected him. He tried to act cool about it and just stay friends, but he couldn't let it go. He ended up applying to the hunter school just to be near her. The current Shin Hyuk was furious, wondering why he'd do that instead of getting revenge for his friend. Back in the present, Seora noticed his expression and asked if he was okay. He quickly tried to cover, insisting he was fine. She didn't seem convinced. She told him he looked so shocked that it had actually scared her. He thought to himself that anyone would be shocked. Just when his life was finally starting to look up, he suddenly finds out he's part of a criminal organization. Seora kept talking, completely unaware. She said she knew he was skilled, but getting hired at the school was really hard. She admitted she thought it would take him at least 2 years. He laughed and confirmed that he passed on his first try. The whole thing was ridiculous. The original Shin Hyuk must have really liked her a lot to do all this. Sora then asked how he was settling in at the school. He just told her it was fine, since the semester was still new. She seemed a little hurt. She asked why he hadn't contacted her her at all, saying she wished he'd at least let her know he passed. He quickly made an excuse, saying things had just been too hectic. Inside, he was relieved he hadn't called. He probably would have said something stupid and made things awkward. She seemed to accept his reason, but then she asked if he'd stopped the donations, since nothing came in this month. Shin Hyuk almost choked. He had no idea what she was talking about. There was no trace of it in his bank history. He realized he had to speak up. For the sake of his own future, he couldn't let himself get drained like this forever. He decided to address the donations. He told her he was going to stop sending money from now on, and asked if that was okay. Her answer was not what he expected at all. She said it was fine, that he'd already given a lot and it wasn't mandatory. She even pointed out that a teacher's salary isn't that high. He was completely thrown off. Seora smiled and said it was totally fine, explaining that Antaz never forced anyone to donate. This just made Shin Hyuk wonder how much of a pushover the original Kang Shin Hyuk must have been to give away his money voluntarily. She told him not to worry, because everyone in the organization already knew his situation. In fact, she said that since he passed the school's hiring process and defeated a semi-rank hunter, his reputation within Antas had probably gone up. She looked genuinely honored and told him how happy she was to have his help. She wanted them to change the world together. Shin Hyuk knew what that really meant, destroying it. He started thinking through what he knew from the novel. Most criminal groups that hide in schools are there for terrorism, but Antas wasn't like that. They didn't just kill people for no reason. In fact, they had a rule about not messing with students unless it was absolutely necessary. That's when he figured it out. Seora's real mission was probably to recruit talented students into their organization. The problem was, this was only what he knew from the original novel. He had no idea what other secrets were hidden in this new side story about him. He was completely lost on what to do next. Seora gave him some advice. She told him to just focus on getting used to school life for now, and maybe even try to make some friends. He pushed back, telling her he needed more than that. He asked for at least a rough idea of his mission, explaining that he needed to know what to expect so he could make a proper plan. Sora explained that since he was the only Antaz member in the high school department, the mission was his. She told him it would take a long time, so there was no rush. To make it official, she suggested they meet regularly on the last Tuesday of every month. She figured it was a good day since there were no staff dinners, so they could eat together. With that settled, she said goodbye and left him standing there, completely stunned. He just stared at his food, the word Tuesday echoing in his mind. He was now locked into this. Time passed, and his training with Choyurong began. The old master was impressed with his progress. He decided to write a secret manual just for him, and even helped guide his inner energy with his own techniques. The master explained that he had opened Shin Hyuk's energy center, but mastering it was now his own responsibility. He gave him one strict rule: practice the energy circulation technique every single day, without fail. Choyurong asked if he understood. Shin Hyuk sat silently in the snow, ready to begin. Shin Hyuk tried to focus, concentrating on circulating the energy, just like the master had taught him. Choyurong watched him, his expression serious. But a second later, the master's hand came crashing down on his head. He angrily demanded to know if Shin Hyuk even understood his instructions. Shin Hyuk shot back, asking why he'd interrupt him when he was trying to concentrate. The old man just scoffed, saying Shin Hyuk was the one who wasn't focused at all. Choyurong explained that his thoughts were a mess and were clouding the flow of his energy. He could tell something was seriously troubling him, which caught Shin Hyuk completely off guard. The master told him the technique should feel as natural as breathing, but his was all wrong. He told Shin Hyuk to just speak his mind, offering the wisdom of an old man. Shin Hyuk hesitated for a moment. Then he asked the master for his honest impression. Did he seem like a good person or a bad one? The old man just snapped at him, yelling that he was a fool for asking such a stupid question. Shin Hyuk thought to himself that this guy was seriously annoying. But then Choyurong gave his real answer. He said Shin Hyuk just looked like an unlucky pretty boy, as if King Yomura himself had granted his wish to be reborn handsome. The comment was so weirdly accurate that Shin Hyuk could only apologize for ever doubting his master's wisdom. Choyurong told him it was simple. If he did good things, he was a good man. If he did evil, he was a bad man. But he added that only people with power have the right to worry about things like that. He explained that in the martial world, only the strong survive. The losers are always remembered as evil because they aren't around to tell their side of the story. He said that everyone who caused trouble in the past, no matter their side, all died young, without power. Good and evil are just ideas. The master asked if that helped. Shin Hyuk took a moment to think, then quietly thanked him. With the lesson over, the master told him to go grab a choco bar. Shin Hyuk agreed, but his mind was stuck on one thing the old man had said. He remembered the master's warning. Anyone who got involved in big trouble, good or evil, died young. That wasn't for him. He just wanted to make money quietly and live a long, peaceful life. Things like terrorism, assassinations, or even revenge, none of that mattered to him. He had no desire to change the world, especially if it meant dying young. That's when Seora spoke up. She sounded surprised, asking him why he was calling already. She reminded him that they were supposed to meet on the last Tuesday of every month. Shin Hyuk told her he had something important to say. Seora noticed how serious he was and asked what was going on. He was so nervous, he could feel the sweat dripping down his neck. He finally got the words out, asking with a forced smile if he could quit Antas. Seora froze, completely shocked by his question. Her expression changed in an instant. Her eyes glowed red, and she lunged at him with her fork. Fork stopped just inches from his face, but the food she'd flung at him splattered everywhere. The whole restaurant turned to stare at the commotion. Shin Hyuk was sweating bullets. He knew she'd be angry, but he never thought she'd actually try to stab him in a restaurant. Seora's voice was ice cold. She demanded a proper explanation for what he just said, warning him that if he didn't talk, she'd make sure he regretted it. Trying to stay calm, he agreed to explain everything, but he suggested they clean up and find a more private place to talk first. He was right. Everyone was staring. A couple nearby whispered to each other, guessing he must have cheated on her. Seora seemed to agree. She told him to follow her to her car, explaining that she had something she needed to show him. So they got in her car and started driving. Shin Hyuk was getting nervous, asking why she was suddenly dragging him all the way to Incheon. Seora just told him she had things to show him too, and that she wasn't going to let this go with just words. Seora demanded an explanation for what he said back at the cafe. Shin Hyuk tried to joke that she'd technically stolen the fork she was holding, but she wasn't laughing. The fork pressed against his neck. He quickly started explaining, reminding her that he only joined Antas because of the discrimination he faced at the academy. He tried to argue that public perception was changing. Seora just scoffed. She told him that winning one duel didn't mean anything had really changed. He was annoyed that she kept interrupting him, but he pushed on, explaining that after everything that happened, he was starting to see a new possibility for himself. He wondered aloud if he could make a difference on his own, without needing Antas. He finally admitted the real problem. Their methods were just too extreme for him. His hands tightened on the wheel. He couldn't get past the terrorism and the way they killed people without a second thought. It just wasn't what he signed up for. Seora didn't even look at him. She just repeated what she told him before, that the government had framed them for some of the terror attacks. Then she added that everyone who died had it coming. Shin Hyuk looked at her, horrified. He told her flat out that no one in the world deserves to die. Seora exploded. She yelled that he wasn't even on those missions, then accused him of being scared. He didn't deny it. He just admitted he was terrified and begged her to put the fork down. She called him a coward. As she pulled the fork away, she said she knew this wasn't going to be easy. But Shin Hyuk told her he was prepared. He knew leaving a group like Antas wasn't simple, and he came with a plan. He told her to search for a specific news story, the assassination case of a corrupt official named Min Young-sok. Seora recognized the name immediately. She agreed that the guy was a scumbag who deserved it, but the article said he died in a truck crash, along with his driver and 2 others. Shin Hyuk then explained who the driver was. The man, Mr. Kim, was just a contract worker, raising his daughter alone after his wife died. He then asked her a simple question. Did she really think that driver was part of the corruption? Seora looked horrified as she quietly admitted the answer was no. Shin Hyuk knew exactly who that driver's daughter was. Her name was Lee Sewa, a top-ranked heroine in the novel he'd read. She was supposed to be a huge deal later on, tangled up with the main characters. He laid out the terrible truth. The man driving the car when Min Young-seok died was Lee Seowa's father. Antas had taken credit for the assassination, exposing the official's corruption. The public reaction wasn't bad at all. Some people even supported Antas for it. But he explained that Mr. Kim, the driver, and his family were just buried in all the noise. Seora couldn't accept it. She stammered that it had to be a mistake. She insisted that Antas has a strict rule against harming civilians, a rule he knew just as well as she did. So he looked her straight in the eye. He asked her if she was being serious. He pushed her, asking if she really thought Mr. Kim was the only civilian who ever got killed by mistake, just because they were near an Antas target. He could see she had been trying to ignore it, but deep down, she knew. The realization finally hit her, and he knew he'd gotten through. As she struggled with the truth, he spoke again. He told her he was finally going to explain the real reason he had turned down her confession. Shin Hyuk was confused. He just wanted her to listen to what he had to say. Seora, with the fork still pressed against his throat, sarcastically agreed that he had the right to speak. He started his story by talking about the great portal breakout from 15 years ago. He told her that both of his parents died in that accident when he was young. This was a complete shock to him. This part of his life was never mentioned in the novel. Seora acknowledged it must have been hard, but she didn't see what it had to do with him rejecting her. As she pressed the fork into his neck, she told him to just finish his story. He continued, explaining that everyone had said hunters were on their way. If they had just shown up, his parents could have been saved. He laid out the facts. The portal in his neighborhood had the highest danger rating. It was the area that needed help the most, and it was right near the association's headquarters. But no one came. Not a single person. Instead, dozens of hunter teams were sent to the rich neighborhoods, where only a few weak dungeons had opened. And that's when Seora understood. Kang Shin-yuk had gone through the exact same thing she had. Seora was still suspicious. She asked why there wasn't a huge public outcry if something that terrible had really happened. She even pointed out that it was never mentioned in the book, Hunter Life Chronicles. Shin Hyuk told her the media never reported it. The rich and powerful people who were protected used their money to bury the story completely. He admitted that if he hadn't investigated it himself, he never would have known either. And that's when it all clicked for him. This was the reason Seora had joined a group like Antas. Seora looked completely worn out. She told him it was strange how she'd only talked about her parents when she was supposed to be explaining why she rejected him. Then she finally admitted the truth. It wasn't because she didn't like him. She grabbed onto his shirt, desperate. She confessed that she couldn't let go of her need for revenge until she had done right by her parents. She begged him for help, admitting she felt like she was losing her mind. This is where everything got complicated for Shin-yuk. He thought to himself, himself that no parent would ever want their kid to join a terrorist group just for revenge. He knew that if he were the real Kang Shin-hyuk, he would have helped her without a second thought. But he wasn't. He had no real connection to Seora. Sure, her story was sad, and she was pretty, but that didn't mean he had to risk his life for her. He realized he had a choice. He could just apologize one more time, walk away, and go back to the peaceful, free life he'd always wanted. He thought about his situation. He'd read the novel, so he knew the future. He'd even stolen opportunities that were meant for the main character. All he had to do was cut ties with Seora and leave Antas. His life would be smooth sailing after that, but something was stopping him. He couldn't shake the memory of her grabbing onto him. Her desperate words echoed in his mind. He was completely frozen, caught off guard by his own hesitation. Suddenly, Seora screamed for him to look out. The car swerved violently on the road. He slammed on the brakes, barely avoiding a crash. They were both completely shaken. Seora apologized, saying she'd put the fork down since he was driving, but Shin-hyuk wasn't listening. His mind was made up. He turned to her and asked a simple question. Did she even know who she was supposed to get revenge on? Seora looked at him, completely surprised, and asked if he had changed his mind. She finally answered him. The man she was after was Kim In-hak, who was the director of the Hunter Management Agency back then, but she was sure he didn't give those orders alone. Shin-hyuk let out a quiet, if Kim In-hak was the director back then, he must be even more powerful now. Seeing his reaction, Seora called him a dumbass. She asked hopefully if this meant he was taking back what he said about quitting. He told her no, he was still quitting Antas, but he promised to help her personally. She was completely confused, asking how he could possibly help when he himself said it was too hard, even for the organization. He argued back, forcing her to face the truth. He asked if she really thought Antas Saz would just capture a man like Kim In-hak for her. He pushed harder, questioning their empty promises of later and asking if they'd given her any real answers. That's when his knowledge of the novel kicked in. He remembered Congressman Kim In-hak. The guy's power just kept growing and growing until the protagonist finally stepped in to stop him. And he remembered what happened to Seora, too. In 3 years, the main character would expose her as an Antas member, and she'd be sentenced to life without parole. The thought settled in his mind, cold and clear. In just 3 years, the girl sitting right there was going to rot in prison for the rest of her life. Seora argued that if she just kept succeeding in her missions, Antas would have to help her, but Shin-hyuk shot that down immediately. He told her they wouldn't. She got angry, demanding to know what he could possibly know about it. He told her straight up that he'd read her future. He knew exactly what kind of organization Antas was. He let out a realizing she wouldn't believe him unless she saw the truth for herself. Shin-hyuk then laid out his offer. He promised to help her get her revenge. But there was one condition. She had to leave Antas with him. She couldn't understand. She argued that without Antas, getting revenge was impossible. He couldn't believe she was still willing to go with them, even knowing they wouldn't really help. He told her he didn't want to have to do this. But talking had failed. He was confident that once they arrived, she would finally change her mind. As they drove toward a massive, brightly lit gate, she finally asked where he was taking her. He told her they were headed to the source of all of Antas's funding. He looked over at her with a confident smirk. Then he dropped the bombshell. They were on their way to buy drugs. He looked at the building doubtfully, pointing out that it didn't even seem to be open. Shin-hyuk just confirmed this was the place, admitting it was his first time here too. He walked inside, explaining that while it looked like a simple second-hand clothing shop, it was actually a cover for something else. Inside, a man with a flashy jacket sat behind the counter. Shin-hyuk knew this place was the main distribution center for Antas China's synthetic drugs in Korea. Shin-hyuk walked right up to him and asked if this was where he could buy Genesis. The dealer just stared back, pretending not to know what he was talking about. Shin-hyuk pushed, saying they knew everything and just wanted to buy it. The dealer scoffed, wondering what kind of lunatic had sent them to his shop. He explained that this was a wholesale operation, not for small-time buyers. Then he pulled out a huge knife, telling them to get lost before they got into real trouble. But Shin-hyuk didn't even flinch. He just smirked, finding it funny that the dealer called his source a lunatic. He then added that the person who sent him wasn't a man. He asked for the dealer's name, promising to tell someone named Malin exactly what he'd said. The man's face went pale. He dropped the knife, asking in complete shock how he knew her. Shin-hyuk lied with a straight face, claiming he and Malin were close back in China. He said she was the one who told him about this place. Of course, it was a total lie. Turns out, Malin was the daughter of Antas China's boss. She was also the one in charge of distributing their synthetic drug, Genesis, all throughout Korea. The truth was, Shin-hyuk didn't know anyone that powerful. This whole act was just his last resort to finally convince Choi Sora. He pushed his luck even further, offering to call Malin for the dealer if he was suspicious, but he added a warning that doubting him would come with a price. The dealer immediately panicked. He apologized for not recognizing him and asked how much they needed. Shin-hyuk just told him to bring as much as he could. The dealer agreed to get the latest batch and rushed off. With him gone, Sora looked completely lost, asking what they were talking about. He turned to her and finally explained. He told her they were here to buy drugs, figuring she wouldn't believe it unless she saw it herself. This was Antas China's drug wholesale shop. Seora couldn't believe it wasn't a metaphor. The Antas was actually making drugs. Shin-hyuk confirmed it was true. He knew from the novel that this part of their business wouldn't become public knowledge for years. He explained what he knew from the novel. Eventually, Antas Korea would find out about the drug operation and complain to the China branch, but they didn't want to stop it. They just wanted a cut of the profits. That greed would lead to a huge fight between the two groups, and in the end, the novel's main character would show up and destroy them both. Seeing she still didn't believe him, he offered to have the dealer switch to Korean so she could listen in and hear the truth for herself. Just then, the dealer came back, holding the packages. He explained that since they had just expanded to this area, their supply of the drug, Genesis, wasn't very big yet. He said that altogether, it was about a month's worth. He then begged Shin-hyuk to put in a good word with Maylin for him. Shin-hyuk agreed and told him to switch to Korean now. The dealer hesitated, asking if it was okay for the woman next to him to hear. Shin-hyuk just smirked and said it was fine, lying that she was crazy about Genesis too. The dealer looked surprised. Seora just stared, completely confused by what was happening. But then, Seora caught on. She suddenly put on a dazed look, gave 2 thumbs up, and started acting like an addict, saying how good Genesis was. The dealer completely bought Seora's act. He mumbled that she really needed to cut back, surprised that she liked the drug so much. Trying to sound important, the dealer mentioned that a new series of the drug was coming out soon, but that it would take time to reach Korea. Shin-hyuk played his part perfectly. He agreed it would be a while, adding that someone close to Maylin could just get it from China. Seora leaned in, whispering that she didn't understand any of this talk about Maylin. She asked if the whole thing was fake. Shin-hyuk just told her to trust him, asking if she really thought he'd risk his life coming here for no reason. The dealer thought for a moment, finding it strange that Seora would know someone like Maylin. Pushing his doubts aside, he finally asked how they were going to pay. Shin-hyuk calmly asked if he could use a card. The dealer laughed, telling him not to joke around and to just pay cash. So Shin-hyuk offered a different deal, a 3-month installment plan. That was the last straw. The dealer exploded, shouting that there were no cards and definitely no installments. Instead of paying, Shin-hyuk offered a 3-month coma. He focused his energy and struck the dealer with a single, devastating blow to the head. The man dropped instantly. Seora could only watch, completely shocked. He remembered the technique he'd just used. By forcing internal energy into the brain, he could make someone lose their memory. It was a difficult skill, but perfect for a situation like this. He knew the strike would cause serious brain damage. The man would wake up completely different, but Shin-hyuk felt no pity for someone who sold drugs for a living. He turned to Seora, his expression intense. He asked if she finally believed him now, adding that it would be a real problem if she still thought this was all fake. Seora was completely floored. She stammered, asking how he could have possibly known all of this, and for how long. He gave her a simple lie, claiming he found out about the drugs while working in China. But he knew the real answer. He'd read it all in a novel. With his point made, Shin-hyuk decided it was time to go. They would pin the whole mess on this guy and leave. His only goal was convincing Seora, not taking down the entire operation. As they walked away, he knew another seller would just take this guy's place. The important thing was to not leave any traces, because if Antos discovered outside interference, they would launch a serious investigation. Seora finally accepted it. She told him she understood now and would handle her resignation from Antos. She'd make up a story about him kicking her out. Even though the excuse annoyed her, she thanked him for showing her the truth. Shin-hyuk couldn't believe it. He asked if she was really going to stay with Antos after everything he'd just shown her. But Seora explained that it wasn't that simple for her. She'd been in the organization for a long time and had duties. They wouldn't just let her walk away. He had to admit she was right. Antos was a massive international crime group, not some club you could just quit. Still, he couldn't just leave her like this. He felt like he had to find some way to help. But then, his knowledge of the novel kicked in. He realized this was for the best. If Choi Sora quit now, it could change the future in unpredictable ways. For the original story to play out, she had to stay at Antos. He asked her if any of her past missions counted as serious crimes. She shook her head, explaining her job was just to scout students with talent. She added that it was a long process, so she hadn't really done anything yet. Hearing that, Shin-hyuk let out a breath. He told her he had a plan. He laid it out for her. From now on, she was going to be a double agent. Seora was completely stunned, unable to believe what she was hearing. He explained the plan. She needed to collect Antos' secrets to give to the police. That way, if her cover was ever blown, she wouldn't face serious charges. He told her to just do a bad job on any missions they gave her. The most important part was to act like a double agent who never actually commits any crimes. Seora was worried, saying there was nothing useful she could tell the police. He reassured her that even small information would help, and if things got bad, he'd testify for her. But he immediately added a warning not to trust him too much. If things got dangerous, he'd cut her off to save himself. He instantly regretted saying it out loud. Seora just smiled, blushing. She told him he must really like her to be helping this much. Shin-hyuk had no idea how she came to that conclusion. She insisted that no one helps someone this much without having feelings. He got annoyed and told her to think whatever she wanted, then said she should take a taxi back to Seoul alone. She asked if he wasn't coming with her. He just said he had to be somewhere else. She laughed, joking that this wasn't a very good way to play hard to get. He sighed to himself as he watched her go. She was seriously a handful. Shin-hyuk walked through the snow, finally reaching the old master. He apologized for being late. The master noted that Shin-hyuk's eyes looked clearer, a sign he'd handled things well. Shin-hyuk gave his teacher the credit. The old man was pleased, but he wasn't letting him off the hook, saying he still had to pay for being late. The master's energy shifted. He warned Shin-hyuk to get ready for a tough training session. But Shin-hyuk quickly changed the subject, mentioning he'd been to Chinatown. He pulled a bottle of bamboo leaf liquor from his bag. He explained he'd bought it as a gift, but figured they couldn't drink it now since they had to train. The master's serious expression melted it away. He looked at the bottle and immediately declared they were taking the day off. The old man took a drink and praised the liquor, calling it the best he's ever had. He was even happier to see the food. He asked how Shin Hyuk knew he was from Sichuan. It then joked about how just a moment ago he was ready to punish him for being late. The master tried to play it off, saying he was only harsh because he was worried. Shin Hyuk thought to himself that if his master had been any more worried, he'd probably be dead. As he poured a drink, the old man got serious. He asked what happened, pointing out that Shin Hyuk used to be the kind of guy who always looked for a way out of training, but now he was asking to train even when the master himself suggested they rest. The old man joked that something impossible must have happened. Shin Hyuk just said that his master's advice had been a huge help. He explained the gift was just a small way of saying thank you, but inside, he was thinking about the real reason. Now that he'd decided to help Choi Seora, he had no idea what kind of danger he'd be facing in the future. He knew he had to get stronger, even just a little bit, to be ready for whatever came next. This whole situation with Choi Seora was a path that never existed in the original story he knew. He knew he was strong enough to go against an A-rank hunter, but if he ever had to face a high-ranking executive from Antas, Malin, the result would be a total disaster. He wouldn't stand a chance. He felt like he was forgetting his place. He was just a B-rank swordsmanship instructor, in no position to be helping people. A small smile formed on his face, at least not in his current state. He thought back to the original story. The first big opportunity for the protagonist, Lee Ji-sung, was finding a secret book. It contained a powerful internal energy technique that awakened his true potential. But unlike Lee Ji-sung, who had to struggle to finally use that internal energy, Shin Hyuk's own opportunity had opened his energy core directly. As the old master happily ate his food, praising the chef, Shin Hyuk suddenly realized something. The old man sitting right there was the strongest person in this entire world. If he could just keep learning from him, he'd be able to protect himself from anything. The old master looked over at him, finally remembering his role as a teacher. Shin Hyuk simply confirmed it, calling him master. The master immediately started giving him a shopping list for different kinds of ramen. Shin Hyuk's face twitched, but he forced himself to stay calm. He had to remember, this old man was the strongest person in the world. Shin Hyuk promised to buy more next time he came. The master just added more snacks to the list before finishing his bowl. Shin Hyuk took a deep breath, trying to find his inner peace. The master, meanwhile, was already pulling out more instant noodles. He tried his best to stay calm, but his patience was wearing thin. The old man just kept going, preparing another cup of noodles right in front of him. As the master happily slurped down his noodles, Shin Hyuk couldn't take it anymore. He wanted to scream at him to stop eating so much. To make things worse, the master even offered him a bite. Shin Hyuk was fuming. He'd bought a whole box last time, and now he knew exactly why they were already out of ramen. The master tried to explain himself, saying he was just bored and lonely. Shin Hyuk didn't say a word. Suddenly, the old man snapped. He grabbed Shin Hyuk's head and yelled at him for nagging, asking if he had any idea what it was like to be trapped for hundreds of years. Just as quickly, his anger faded. He told Shin Hyuk that while he was glad to see him motivated, rushing his training would only ruin his progress. He continued, saying that Shin Hyuk seemed uninterested in his training anyway. He told him that greatness can't be achieved just by rushing. Shin Hyuk argued back, saying that after a month, he didn't feel like he was improving at all. The master looked at him and asked why he was suddenly in such a hurry to get stronger. Shin Hyuk decided to be honest. He told the master he paid more attention to his cup ramen than to his training. He asked if there were any shortcuts, since he wasn't being taught properly anyway. He even suggested something like a hidden elixir. That was the last straw. The master grabbed his head again, furious that a little praise had made him so bold. He threw Shin Hyuk to the ground, yelling that a beginner looking for shortcuts was ridiculous. He sarcastically asked if he was planning to conquer the world after getting strong so easily. The master threatened to hit him again, but Shin Hyuk wasn't intimidated. He just stared back and told the old man not to test him. The master tried to sound wise, repeating his lecture that martial arts can't be rushed. He insisted he wasn't neglecting his teaching just for some ramen. That's when Shin Hyuk saw his opening. He calmly mentioned that with prices going up, he probably couldn't buy any more ramen. The master froze. The master accused him of making a threat. Shin Hyuk just stared back and said he was only stating the facts. He kept going, listing off other popular snacks that were now too hard to find. The master looked like his entire world was falling apart. The old man was speechless. He couldn't believe his own student had him completely cornered. Finally, the master broke. He grabbed Shin Hyuk and admitted he'd failed to appreciate his student's passion. He promised to stick by his side and teach him properly from now on. With the deal struck, Shin Hyuk promised to get the things his master enjoyed. The old man warned him not to complain about how tough the training was about to get. Shin Hyuk accepted, ready for whatever came next. The next day, during lunchtime at the academy, Shin Hyuk was feeling pretty good. He'd gotten a text from Choi Seora that morning. She told him her withdrawal from Antas had been processed safely. He hoped that was the last of the original Shin Hyuk's problems. All he wanted was to help Seora and then finally live in peace. Suddenly, two of his students appeared right behind him, making him jump. One of them asked if something good had happened because he'd just scared her. He asked if they were heading to lunch. They said of course and invited him to join them before he had to go to the auditorium. Shin Hyuk had no idea what she was talking about. She reminded him about the vice principal's announcement from that morning's assembly. She told him he had an interview interview for the school's new YouTube channel. He remembered then he'd been so focused on Siora's text that it had completely slipped his mind. She added that the vice principal wanted him to go first because he was the best looking. Shin-hyuk couldn't believe it, calling the reason totally ridiculous. The student joked that if the interview went well, he might get a bonus. That actually got his attention. She handed him a list of questions, explaining that a student would film it and a teacher would handle the editing. He could look them over during lunch. He was surprised. This was way more official than he'd thought. The student added that even the principal would review the video, so he had to do a good job. With that settled, the two students happily ran ahead toward the cafeteria. But then, one of them stopped. She said there was one more thing she forgot to tell him. He told her to just say it. She explained that she'd be interviewing him alongside the student council president. She warned him that the president had a weird personality and might ask some strange, unplanned questions. Shin-hyuk just smiled, thinking he could handle anything, as long as it wasn't about his love life. She tried to explain that the president was just a very odd person. She told him not to worry, though. If things got too weird, he could just give her a signal to end the interview early. He laughed and told the students he was counting on them to get his good side. He thought about the student council president. Back when he was in school, that title felt like something out of a myth. At the same time, a student with 2 swords on her back was walking through the academy. She wondered what the new swordsmanship instructor, Kang Shin-hyuk, was really like. She'd heard he was incredibly strong. Turns out, this was the student council president. She smiled to herself, curious to finally meet him. The thing about the Hunter School is that most students live in dorms. Since they spend almost all their time there, their parents are always curious about what school life is actually like. On top of that, the school is incredibly strict for security reasons. Weekend outings and family visits are limited, which led to a lot of complaints. The government decided they needed a new policy to deal with it. Their solution was to create official YouTube channels for the Hunter schools. And of course, this academy was chosen to be the very first one to try it out. Shin-hyuk knew this whole YouTube thing was never mentioned in the novel, so he assumed it would just get canceled. But of all the rotten luck, he was the one stuck doing the pilot interview. As he walked in, someone called out, surprised that he was early. He just gave a quick hello. He turned to Ms. Min, the technology teacher, and told her he was counting on her for the interview. She just smiled and said she was only there to handle the editing. He laughed, admitting it was his first interview, so he was a bit nervous too. He added that he was impressed she knew how to edit video, but she explained that she didn't really know how. The principal just told her to do it since she was the tech teacher. Shin-hyuk realized they just dumped the work on her, figuring she was a pushover. Ms. Min admitted she wasn't even getting paid overtime. She was just going to do a quick, sloppy edit and go home, since she wouldn't get a cut of the views anyway. That's when Shin-hyuk understood. The whole YouTube project was so poorly managed, it was no wonder it never even appeared in the novel. Just then, the student filming announced that the camera was all set, and right on cue, she said the president had arrived. Miss Min waved and called the president over. A girl with glasses walked in and greeted everyone. A text box identified her as Kim Se-jin, the school's student council president. The student filming was impressed. The president was tall and carried herself with so much confidence anyone could tell who she was just by looking at her. Shin-hyuk was shocked. He couldn't believe a character with this much presence never even appeared in the novel. The president smiled, confirmed he was Mr. Kang, and told him he was incredibly handsome. She said she was looking forward to the interview, betting the video would get a great response. Shin-hyuk just laughed and agreed. He thought to himself that her social skills were excellent. She didn't seem like the weird type he'd been warned about. With the introductions over, they all got ready for the interview to begin. The interview itself went off without a hitch. There was one awkward moment when Aun-seo started teasing him about being a pretty boy teacher, but she was sharp enough to see he was uncomfortable and immediately changed the subject. She announced that they had reached the end of their prepared questions. She said they wouldn't keep him any longer, knowing he didn't have any classes that afternoon. Shin-hyuk smiled, playing along. He said there was nothing to be sorry for, and that he was actually a little disappointed it was over, claiming it was all for the students. But that turned out to be a lie. He admitted he was definitely going to request overtime pay from the school for this. He laughed and said he was kidding, but then immediately whispered that he was serious. Ms. Min found it hilarious. Just as they were wrapping up, the student council president, Se-jin, spoke up and called his name. She reminded him that he'd said he was disappointed the interview was over. She then suggested that the viewers would probably be pretty disappointed too, if it just ended there. She looked at him with a grin and proposed a sparring match, right then and there. The other two were completely caught off guard. The request came out of nowhere. Shin-hyuk was just as confused. He remembered Yoon-seo warning him that the student council president was a bit weird. This must be what she was talking about. Yoon-seo tried to step in, telling the president she couldn't just ambush him like this. But Se-jin just smiled and explained her logic. She said since the teacher was disappointed it was over, she wanted to give the viewers something more. She apologized for being so sudden, but explained that she just really loves sparring. Since he was the swordsmanship instructor and she was in the club, she couldn't help herself. Shin-hyuk looked at her. He could tell she was being serious. There was no bad intention behind it. He figured he'd just politely decline and finish the interview. But then he changed his mind. He told her he was fine with it and that they should do it. Now it was Se-jin's turn to be surprised. She asked if he was sure, since they gave him no warning. Shin-hyuk just smiled and said it was fine, then asked if she had swords ready. She confirmed that she did, having brought 2 training steel swords with her. Shin Hyuk thought about the match. He might have the original Shin Hyuk's physical abilities, but his real training came from his new master, Cho Yurong. To him, this was a chance to test the skills he had been looked at learning. The 2 students who set up the interview were completely freaking out. This was not how it was supposed to go. The blonde one was especially panicked. All she could think was that this mess was going to make her late. Word spread fast, and soon other students showed up with popcorn, ready for a show. The student council president tied her hair back, getting serious. But Shin Hyuk wasn't nervous at all. He remembered his duel with Mr. Jong. It taught him that the hunters here weren't nearly as powerful as everyone thought. He thought back to his training. He could almost hear his master's voice, reminding him over and over again to never let his guard down. He faced her, sword in hand. She was a 3rd year and the student council president. He decided to treat her as a quasi-hunter just to be safe. Shin Hyuk casually told the student council president she could have the first move. She didn't hesitate for a second. She lunged forward, blade aimed straight for him. The students watching couldn't believe his speed. One of them yelled out in excitement before her friend tried to quiet her down. Shin Hyuk was surprised. She was definitely fast, but he hadn't expected her to open with a thrust instead of a basic slash. But she knew what it meant. To choose a difficult move, like a thrust, showed he was completely confident in his accuracy. He knew that an attack like this would make most students panic and lose their rhythm. Without missing a beat, she followed her thrust with a powerful upward slash. Shin Hyuk was impressed. In an instant, their blades met in a flurry of strikes. Sejin was getting frustrated. She demanded to know how long he was just going to dodge her attacks, but Shin Hyuk just watched her, completely calm. The fight suddenly reminded Shin Hyuk of his own training. His master, Chu Yuryang, had been absolutely merciless. He remembered the old man laughing while beating him senseless, and his body still ached just thinking about it. But that brutal training was exactly why this fight felt so simple. He felt like he could dodge Sejin's attacks with his eyes closed. He saw her mistake clearly. She was leaning too far forward, completely focused on her attacks and leaving herself off balance. Sejin declared that she wasn't done yet and launched another strike, but Shin Hyuk knew that from her position, she was wide open to an attack from the side. He just watched her, taking it all in. He remembered his master's words perfectly. The old man had called him a fool, telling him he'd tire out quickly by putting too much force into just his hands and arms. Even now, the memory still ticked him off. Shin Hyuk shook off the memory and turned his master's lesson into advice for Sejin. He pointed out that she was putting too much force into just her hands and arms, and that she'd get tired fast. He told her that if she learned to use her whole body, starting from the shoulders, her attacks would get much better. The advice seemed to hit home. She stopped and thought about what he said. Sejin immediately adjusted her grip on the sword. Shin Hyuk was impressed. She was a quick learner. Just by fixing her grip, her entire stance changed. Her whole aura felt stronger. Shin Hyuk figured this must be why the student council president was so confident. He tightened his own grip on his sword. The friendly lesson was over. He warned Sejin that he was going to start attacking for real now, and that she should be careful. The other students watched nervously. One of them couldn't take the tension and started stress eating a cookie. Just as they were about to start again, Shin Hyuk suddenly held up his hand, stopping everything. He had a strange look on his face, and Sejin asked if something was wrong. Sejin shook her head and then asked for permission to use her mana. She promised she wouldn't use it to power up her sword. Shin Hyuk was surprised. He knew most students didn't learn to use mana until their 2nd year, right before they started training in real portals. He knew the system. Students would visit low-rank portals with a teacher or a government-assigned hunter to get real-world experience. But even the small amount of mana you pick up during training is hard to control. He figured she must have noticed how much faster he was, and now he was really curious to see what she could do. Shin Hyuk agreed and told her to go ahead. Sejin thanked him, and a blue aura immediately flared up around her. He realized this was his first real chance to get a feel for mana in a fight. His old master barely let him see it, let alone control it. With her mana active, Sejin lunged forward with incredible speed. Shin Hyuk dodged, and the energy from her strike crackling past him. The force of her strike was incredible. Shin Hyuk had to brace himself just to block it. His hand went numb. He realized that blocking a mana-powered attack without using his own internal energy was pushing him to his limit. Even without channeling mana directly into her weapon, her physical strength had skyrocketed. It was hard to believe she got this strong just from basic training. The thing is, when you fight monsters, your body naturally absorbs some of their mana, but it doesn't just build up forever. Everyone has a limit based on their natural talent. His old master always said that mana was just raw, unrefined energy. Shin Hyuk had already converted all the mana from his old body into a more efficient internal energy. So even if he couldn't use regular mana anymore, what he had was way better. Still, he had a teacher's pride to think about. He wasn't going to use his internal energy here. After just a few more exchanges, he started to figure out her rhythm. He saw the problem with the hunter style of swordsmanship. It was just way too direct. That's because it was made for fighting monsters that don't think. It's also why low-rank hunters get completely destroyed by intelligent enemies. He could already see Sejin slowing down. He had her pattern down perfectly. He could see it clearly. Her movements were getting slower, easier to read. He knew exactly what was coming next. A diagonal slash. She tried to switch it up at the last second, going for a reverse grip thrust. It was a nice try, but it wasn't going to work. He didn't even need his sword. He just stepped on her foot stopping her dead in her tracks. He told her she was way too close for a thrust like that to ever land. She hit the floor hard. The other students just stared, completely shocked. Before she could even process what happened, his sword was at her neck. She looked up at him and admitted it. She had lost. The look on her face was pure bitterness. He realized she was way more competitive than she let on. He thought she fought well, definitely worthy of her position, but her swordplay was just too repetitive. He offered her a hand up and gave her some advice. He explained that while mana boosts strength, she shouldn't rely on it alone. Mixing up her sword techniques was just as important. She took his hand and thanked him, admitting his advice was really helpful. But one of the students watching suddenly froze. She looked like she'd just realized something terrible, and her friend asked what was wrong. She knew the video of the fight was going to blow up. She groaned, realizing her dream of just clocking out on time was officially over. A week after the video dropped, everything had changed. For Shin-hyuk, life had become a whole lot more annoying. Turns out, the sparring video with the student council president went completely viral. Now, he was being mobbed by students everywhere he went, all of them begging for autographs. He tried to set some rules, telling them he would only sign during breaks. Then he went right back to being their teacher, ordering everyone to get ready for stretching and a run. One of the students came up to him with a piece of paper, asking for an autograph. Her friend just stood there, looking completely unimpressed. He even wrote a little note on it, telling her to be happy. He tried to get back to his normal routine, telling the class to start stretching with Lee Jin-soo in the center. Shin-hyuk thought the extra attention was just a pain, especially since he wasn't getting paid for it. But he was wrong. He'd completely forgotten how much of a jungle the internet was. That sparring video didn't just get passed around school. It had over 2 million views. People online were already arguing about it. Some guy thought it was no big deal, just a regular spar. But his friend pointed out the insane part. The teacher didn't use any mana, and the student he fought wasn't just anyone. She was a 2-time martial arts champion, a prodigy everyone expected to become an A-rank hunter after graduation. That's when everyone started asking the real question. Who was Kang Shin-hyuk? Even people who had graduated from the academy had never heard of him. The internet exploded with questions. Was he some hidden powerhouse? What guild was he from? People were even guessing he had to be at least S-rank. His quiet life was officially over. As he was scrolling through everything, something caught his eye. He stared at his phone, completely confused. That's when it hit him. The student council president was clearly a prodigy, but he couldn't remember her name. Kim Se-jin, ever appearing in the original novel. Even after the main characters graduated, she was never mentioned. This world was already different from the one he knew. Just then, one of his colleagues walked up, calling him a YouTube star and teasing him about being famous. It was Park Yeon-suk, another teacher. He laughed and offered Shin-hyuk a coffee. Wishing him good morning, Yeon-suk kept teasing him, saying he must be enjoying all the attention. Shin-hyuk just laughed it off, admitting that while it was fun at first, it was starting to get overwhelming. His colleague told him he was too low-key and should use this chance to become a star, but Shin-hyuk just asked him to stop, saying all he wanted was to live a quiet life. Yeon-suk's expression changed. He said that a quiet life sounded nice, but warned him that today probably wouldn't be very quiet. He explained that the vice principal had asked for Shin-hyuk to stop by his office before the staff meeting. Shin-hyuk had no idea what it could be about. Yeon-suk guessed that maybe the vice principal was giving him a bonus. He told Shin-hyuk that he should be in his private office. Shin-hyuk liked the sound of that. He grabbed his coffee and joked that if the bonus was good, he'd buy the drinks. But as he walked down the hall, a weird feeling started to creep in. He thought about it. Normally, something like this would happen in front of the whole staff. Being called to a private office was strange. All the sudden attention had been throwing him off. But what really bothered him was that the vice principal himself had asked to see him. He stood outside the door and took a breath. A voice from inside called out for teacher Kang Shin-hyuk, telling him to come in. Shin-hyuk opened the door and saw him. It was Kim Man-dong, the vice principal. The man noted that it had been a while since they'd last seen each other. The vice principal was an S-rank hunter, and his presence was completely overwhelming. Shin-hyuk quickly bowed his head and offered a respectful greeting. The vice principal offered him some tea, but Shin-hyuk turned it down, saying he had to prepare for class. Kim Man-dong nodded, agreeing to keep their talk short. That's when the vice principal pointed to a huge sack on the floor. He told Shin-hyuk that everything inside was for him. Shin-hyuk looked closer and saw that the bag was stuffed with letters, each one sealed with red wax. He was completely confused. A big smile spread across his face as he picked one up. He joked with the vice principal, asking if they were fan letters. Man-dong just told him to open one and find out. The vice principal explained that a lot of people were impressed by his duel with Kim Se-jin. And it wasn't just students. Even full-time hunters from top guilds had been reaching out. Shin-hyuk opened the letter. It was a formal challenge. The vice principal added that the sparring video had become a huge promotion for the school, and now every guild wanted a piece of the action. His expression turned serious. This definitely wasn't the kind of bonus he was hoping for. The vice principal then dropped the real number. There were 932 letters in that sack, and they all said the same thing. He looked Shin-hyuk dead in the eyes and made it crystal clear. Every single one of them was a formal duel challenge. He looked at the letter, trying to figure out what he could have possibly done wrong to cause all this. The vice principal told him he hadn't done anything wrong. People were just trying to get famous, by challenging him. His background as a teacher from a non-hunter school just made him a more interesting target. That hit Shin Hyuk hard. He wanted to know how that information got out. The vice principal simply reminded him that not everyone at the school was his friend. He said he suspected one of the other teachers leaked his background, but the bigger issue was that the public comments on the video were turning ugly. People were now accusing the student council president of throwing the fight. Even Kim Se-jin, the student he dueled, was being dragged into it with claims the match was rigged. Shin Hyuk clenched his teeth. He remembered exactly how much it sucked to get hate comments online. Turns out, this world had its own keyboard warriors too. The vice principal took full responsibility. He said that as a teacher, he should have handled the interview better and announced they were shutting down the school's channel. He explained the channel was supposed to show parents what school was like, but now it was doing more harm than good. With that settled, he looked straight at Shin Hyuk and asked him what he was going to do about it. Shin Hyuk crumpled the letter in his hand. He told the vice principal he was going to clear up all the doubt. The vice principal didn't look convinced. He asked Shin Hyuk exactly how he planned to do that. Shin Hyuk's plan was simple. He figured some of the online trolls must have sent letters, so he just picked the most famous, highest-ranked challengers and beat them. The vice principal reminded him that some of the challengers were A-rank hunters. Since the rank gap was so wide, Shin Hyuk could technically just turn them down. But then, Shin Hyuk had an idea. He declared that it was actually perfect. He would only accept challenges from A-rank hunters. The vice principal understood immediately. By beating the strongest challengers, the weaker ones would back off on their own. He told Shin Hyuk he liked the plan a lot. Then, his expression turned serious. He leaned forward and asked Shin Hyuk for a match. Shin Hyuk froze. He thought the old man had to be out of his mind. There was no way he heard that right. Shin Hyuk just stood there, completely stunned. He was sure he must have misheard. The old man had to be out of his mind. The room was quiet. The vice principal just sat there, waiting for an answer. Shin Hyuk couldn't wrap his head around it. A S-rank hunter wanting to fight a B-rank was just insane. The vice principal seemed to read his mind, admitting that he knew it sounded crazy. The vice principal explained that he was there during the fight with Mr. Jong. He confessed that he honestly thought Shin Hyuk was going to lose, but he could tell Shin Hyuk was still holding back. Judging by his plan to fight A-rankers, the vice principal figured he must think he can handle S-ranks too. Shin Hyuk knew that wasn't right. A-rank hunters were one thing, but once you hit S-rank, the entire game changed. He knew that even A-rank was nothing to joke about. There were only about 1,000 of them in the entire country, and Mr. Jong hadn't even been a real A-rank. He just applied for the exam. Shin Hyuk thought about his training with his master. He was pretty sure he could handle A-rank hunters just fine now, but S-ranks, that was a completely different world. There were less than 100 of them on the entire planet. S-rank mages were basically walking nukes, and the physical fighters were like one-man armies. And the man sitting right in front of him was Kim Man-dong, known as the God of War, one of the best S-ranks out there. Shin Hyuk even remembered a part in the novel where the original main character tried to fight him and got completely destroyed. He tried to reassure himself. He trained directly with a master, not like some guy who just chugged power-up potions all day. But no matter how he spun it, he knew it was impossible. Just then, the vice principal's voice cut through his thoughts, calling his name. Shin Hyuk quickly apologized, saying he was just a bit overwhelmed. The vice principal then made his pitch, explaining that a spar with him would settle things much more cleanly than fighting all those A-rank challengers. The vice principal said that a spar with him would make everything official and stop all the other challenges. Shin Hyuk was stunned, asking if he was serious. The vice principal laid out the terms. If Shin Hyuk failed, he was on his own. He didn't have to win. He just had to land one clean hit. Shin Hyuk's mind raced. One hit? That was impossible. He remembered reading in the novel that Kim Man-dong's body could block an aura blade like it was nothing. Noticing his hesitation, the vice principal called him timid. Then he made a new offer, saying there would be a reward if he could actually land that hit. He offered to let Shin Hyuk skip the new teacher training during the upcoming break. Shin Hyuk's ears perked up. Paid time off? The vice principal knew exactly how to sell it. He explained that for a teacher who didn't come from a hunter school, the training would be 3 weeks of pure misery. He added that Shin Hyuk would still get his full salary. The idea of a 3-week paid vacation was just too sweet to ignore. But Shin Hyuk had to be sure. He asked if the vice principal could really get him out of a mandatory training. Kim Man-dong explained that there was a special program that exempted 2 outstanding teachers every semester. Shin Hyuk was completely sold. He told the vice principal he was very interested, calling it a dream vacation. The vice principal decided to set the match for a month from now to avoid any big political events. Shin Hyuk realized that was the day, right before the break. The vice principal warned him not to bail at the last minute. Shin Hyuk gave his word, promising he wouldn't back down. With the deal made, he said it was time for class and left the office. As he walked down the hall, it finally hit him. He had 1 month to figure out how to land a single hit on Kim Man-dong. On the surface, the offer sounded like a sweet deal. But the more he thought about it, he realized it was basically a death wish. He knew Kim Man-dong was on another level, basically a walking fortress. Meanwhile, Shin Hyuk had only just started getting strong. Trying to actually hurt the man felt completely impossible. He took a breath. He knew the offer was cruel, but he felt like he had to step up. His goal had always been to live a quiet, comfortable life, but he realized he couldn't do that if it meant ruining someone else's. That's when a system window flashed in front of him. It announced that a side story chapter was unlocked, the tale of Kang Shin-hyuk, the vice principal slayer. He laughed at the ridiculous title, but then he realized if the system made a whole story about it, then beating the vice principal couldn't be completely impossible. He knew exactly who could help him pull this off, but when he explained the plan to his master, the old man just called him a lunatic. Shin-hyuk begged for his help, but his master wouldn't even listen. He told him that some things just aren't possible, no matter how hard you try. Shin-hyuk tried to remember the name of a skill he'd heard about, something like Aura Slice. His master corrected him, saying it was called the Aura Blade. The master explained that to even scratch someone with a diamond body, you'd need to master that skill. Without the Aura Blade, he had zero chance. The master told him there was a limit to what he could teach. He explained that against someone with a diamond body, Shin-hyuk would be lucky to even cut a single hair, even if he used every trick in the book. Landing one hit was basically a fantasy. But Shin-hyuk heard that one little phrase, one hit. Shin-hyuk asked what he meant by every trick. The master explained he was talking about using super rare items, like 100-year-old ginseng roots, to get a massive power boost. Shin-hyuk excitedly confirmed that was exactly what he was thinking. The master just grabbed him by the hair, clearly annoyed. He told him it wouldn't be anywhere near what a true master could do, but if Shin-hyuk really pushed himself, he might be able to pull it off just one time, just once. A smile spread across his face. That was all he needed to hear. One clean hit was enough. He thanked his master and immediately turned to leave, ready to get started. But the old man yelled after him, asking where he thought he was going. The master demanded to know how Shin-hyuk planned to find 3 wild ginseng roots. He yelled that they were incredibly expensive and asked where he thought he was going to get that kind of money. As Shin-hyuk ran back through the portal, he explained that in the real world, money makes things happen. And luckily for him, the presidential election was next week. A huge grin spread across his face. He knew exactly what he was going to do. It was time to go buy some ginseng. A woman named Seora was relaxing at home. She complained that someone she knew got famous and hadn't called her once since leaving his old guild. Just then, her phone started ringing. She looked at the caller ID and smiled, knowing exactly who it was. She answered the call. The person on the other end asked what she was up to, and she told him she was just relaxing at home. Then, she casually asked to borrow 100 million won. Shin-hyuk didn't even hesitate. He just hung up the phone. Seora stared at her phone in disbelief. Meanwhile, Shin-hyuk was focused on his plan. He knew he couldn't get his hands on legendary elixirs, but he remembered that normal wild ginseng still existed in this world. There were a few different kinds, but only one could truly be called an elixir, the Qianzhong wild ginseng. The only problem was the insane price. A root over 100 years old could easily cost more than 100 million won. Shin-hyuk remembered that even Lee Ji-sung, a rich kid who ate wild ginseng like it was candy, got completely crushed by Kim Mondong. His master had told him that was because Lee Ji-sung never properly absorbed the ginseng's energy. But Shin-hyuk had an advantage. With the greatest master in Murim helping him, he could pull it off. The only problem was money. 3 roots of wild ginseng would completely bankrupt him. He had to find a way to grow his funds. And that's when he remembered something the vice principal had said. The vice principal wanted to have their duel in a month after the presidential election was over. A wicked smile spread across Shin-hyuk's face. He knew that the best part of any election was the themed stocks. This was his chance. He'd been so busy dealing with teachers and trying to live a quiet life that he hadn't even thought about it. He was already using his knowledge of the novel's plot for everything else. He couldn't believe he'd overlooked something so obvious. He called himself an idiot for putting it off. The first thing he did was go to the bank, where a teller smiled and told him his loan had been approved. In his old life as a freelance writer, banks wouldn't even look at him. But now, as Kang Shin-hyuk, a faculty member at a hunter school, getting a huge loan was easy, and he had an ace up his sleeve. He knew exactly how the presidential election was going to turn out. He knew the winner would be Kim Chul-won. So he took the entire loan and dumped it all into one place, Kim Chul-won's theme stock. It was a massive gamble. A few days passed. A delivery guy showed up at the academy, completely worn out from carrying stacks and stacks of pizza boxes. He was looking for teacher Kang Shin-hyuk. Turns out, Shin-hyuk had ordered 42 pizzas. The guy was so grateful for the huge order that he threw in all the drinks for free. Shin-hyuk walked out to meet him, telling his students they'd help carry the pizzas inside. They just stared, totally confused about what was happening. He just smiled and told them it was pizza for everyone. That's when a status window popped up, showing his new estimated assets. The number was insane. Almost 1.5 billion won. The students absolutely lost their minds. One of them was screaming, saying that when he grew up, he wanted to be just like Kang Shin-hyuk. The students were practically worshipping him. One of them yelled that their teacher wasn't just cool, he was a god. After all, the stock had yielded a 500% profit. Turns out, Shin-hyuk knew something no one else did. The leading candidate in the election was about to get hit with a massive scandal. That caused his rival's approval ratings to shoot through the roof, right when Shin-hyuk had bet everything on him. All that useless information he remembered from the novel had finally paid off. He looked over at the students stuffing their faces and told them not to choke on the pizza. With his mouth completely full, one of the students managed to ask if something good had happened. Shin-hyuk just smiled and said he'd had a little fun with stocks. And he told them there was one more piece of news. He calmly announced that the day before the closing ceremony, he was going to have a sparring match with the vice principal. The entire class started choking on their pizza. The room erupted into chaos. One kid was screaming for medicine, while another just yelled that their teacher was a god. Finally, one of them asked if he was serious. He was actually going to spar with that muscle freak, Kim Mandong. Another student immediately told him off for talking about the vice principal like that. He admitted he couldn't win a real fight, but the vice principal gave him a handicap. If he could land just one clean hit, it would count as his win. The students were horrified. One of them yelled that even landing one hit was a fantasy and that their teacher was going to die. Shin-hyuk just smiled and told them to eat up, joking this might be the last pizza he ever bought them. He explained that soon, the vice principal would make the sparring match public news. But this was all part of his plan. By telling the students first, he was making sure the one clean hit rule was set in stone. That way, the vice principal couldn't change the deal later. The stock investment had worked perfectly, and he had his master's help. All that was left was the training. For the first time, everything was going his way. He was ready to face Kim Mandong. Back in the snowy mountains, his master asked if he had everything he needed. Shin-hyuk confirmed he did. He'd brought boxes of ramen, snacks, chocolate bars, and soda. Basically, all the best instant food he could find. His master, Chu Yu-rung, seemed satisfied with the supplies. But then, he asked the important question. Had Shin-hyuk brought the other item he needed? Shin-hyuk held out the wooden box with a confident smile. He reminded his master that he'd once said, "You need a special connection to find a true elixir." He opened it, revealing 3 glowing roots of Qianzhong wild ginseng, each over 100 years old. The purchase had cost him a fortune, but he'd done it. The master was stunned. He admitted he'd once eaten a 300-year-old root, and while these weren't quite that powerful, they were absolutely the real deal. Shin-hyuk started to mumble something about his master, telling him not to rely on shortcuts, but he quickly stopped himself. He just said he was glad the roots were authentic. His master cut him off and told him to get on with it. He instructed Shin-hyuk to eat the ginseng and circulate the energy, promising to help him from behind. Without wasting a moment, Shin-hyuk prepared to consume the powerful roots. As soon as he ate it, an intense heat flooded his body. His master placed his hands on his back, channeling his own energy to help him control the surge. He'd only ever had cheap ginseng in soup before. Now he understood why a single one of these roots cost 100 million won. The energy was on a completely different level. The master told Shin-hyuk not to resist the energy he was injecting. He explained that since they learned the same technique, it shouldn't be too difficult. Shin-hyuk gritted his teeth. Not too difficult wasn't exactly how he'd describe it. He thought about his old energy level. Before the ginseng, circulating it felt like adding just a few drops of water to a cup. But now, it was like scooping up water with a bucket, over and over without stopping. After a few cycles, even that changed. It felt like his entire body was being washed clean in a giant river of energy. Just then, his master spoke up, saying there was something he wanted to ask. The old man noted how powerful the ginseng was. He said he didn't know how Shin-hyuk did it, but it meant he must have come into a lot of money. He then asked a simple question. If Shin-hyuk was so rich now, couldn't he just quit his job and forget about the whole dangerous sparring match? The master then asked him why he was going through all this trouble to get stronger. Shin-hyuk explained that it was because he had some new responsibilities he couldn't run from. He had to rescue a junior who was hanging out with a bad crowd. He also had to restore the reputation of a student who got caught in nasty rumors because of him. He admitted that quitting would be easier, just like his master said, but he wouldn't be able to live with himself. The master just smiled, saying he knew that was the kind of person Shin-hyuk was. The old man asked what he meant by that, but Shin-hyuk just told him he didn't need to know. The master's eyes started to glow. He said the ginseng's effects were better than he expected. Since there was still some power left over, he decided he would give Shin-hyuk a gift. He warned him that it was going to be a little painful and that he'd have to endure it. Shin-hyuk's eyes shot open, confused and worried. Before he could even ask what was happening, a massive wave of energy slammed into him. The master hit him square in the back, forcing all of the leftover energy into his body at once. The energy flooded his body. The pain was so intense, he could barely even grunt. It felt like he was being ripped apart from the inside. Then, everything erupted. He let out a huge scream as the power exploded from his body in a massive wave. Shin-hyuk couldn't understand what was happening. He thought the old man had lost his mind. He wanted to scream, to ask what this was, but the pain was too much. But the master's voice was cold and sharp. He told him to endure it, to stop making noise, and just focus. He wanted to beg him to stop, but he couldn't even speak. The pain was like having every tooth in his head pulled out at once without any medicine. That's when he realized what was happening. The master's energy wasn't just flowing through him. It was trying to break through a wall inside his body. But this wasn't part of their training. The master was messing with energy pathways that the technique manual never even mentioned. He lost track of how long he'd been enduring the reckless push of energy. All he could do was hold on. Then, with a loud cracking sound, he felt something inside him split apart. The master let out a breath, surprised by how much bad energy had been stored in his body. The old man announced that it was finally broken, telling Shin-hyuk he did well, but Shin-hyuk didn't care. Whatever that was, he never wanted to do it again. He weakly asked the master if it was finally over. The master just stared back at him with an intense look. Then the old man said he'd made a mistake. That wasn't the right spot. Another wave of energy sucked into Shin-hyuk, and he screamed. Shin-hyuk hit the ground, but then shot right back up, absolutely furious. He screamed that he was going to sue him, but but the master was just calmly eating a cup of ramen. He commented on how good it was, and then offered Shin-hyuk a bite, saying he seemed to have recovered his energy. Shin-hyuk refused. He demanded to know what the master had just done to his body, yelling that he'd been given no explanation at all. He asked if he'd done something wrong to deserve that kind of treatment. The master clutched his chest, acting completely heartbroken. He yelled that he'd gone through hell to help him, and this was the thanks he got? The old man kept scolding him, saying he had no decency at all, but as he swung his hand, Shin-hyuk dodged it with a grin, laughing that he'd missed. Shin-hyuk froze. He couldn't believe it. He'd just dodged his master's attack without even thinking. The master seemed pleased, saying his painful efforts hadn't been wasted after all. Still not believing it, Shin-hyuk asked him to try attacking one more time. The old man's expression hardened. He was not happy about being tested. He got angry, yelling that Shin-hyuk shouldn't get cocky just because of some medicine. He unleashed a flurry of kicks, and Shin-hyuk immediately begged for him to stop, screaming that he was wrong. After the beating was finally over, Shin-hyuk caught his breath. He needed to know what the master had just done to his body. The master calmly explained that since there was still some power left from the ginseng, he didn't want it to go to waste. So he used his own energy to open up Shin-hyuk's Ren and Du meridians. Shin-hyuk knew exactly what that meant from all the martial arts stories he'd read. These were the main energy pathways that ran straight through the center of the body. He realized that before, circulating his energy was like taking a long, winding road. But now, with these new pathways open, it was like a straight shot, letting him move his power all at once. It all clicked. That's why his master's hits felt so fast. He remembered reading about this in martial arts stories. Opening these meridians was supposed to make you incredibly strong. He got excited and asked the master if this meant he was now a transcendent master. The old man just stared at him, unimpressed. The master laughed, asking what was wrong with him. He laid out the levels for him, yelling about how ridiculous it was to think he could just skip the peak level and jump straight to transcendent. Shin-hyuk complained that he deserved it after all the pain he went through. His master just warned him not to dodge before smacking him on the head again. The old man was fed up. He told Shin-hyuk that he was the one who suffered, not the punk who just ate a fancy root and expected a free level up. Shin-hyuk argued back, but the master grabbed him. He explained that to jump 2 levels, he'd need something legendary, like a 10,000-year-old ginseng from the heart of a monster. The master sighed, wondering if the kid really thought this was some fantasy novel. He told him not to be too disappointed, because reaching the peak level was still a huge deal. Shin-hyuk then asked if he could use sword ki now. The master looked at him seriously and said that was up to him. He reminded him of his promise to win if he could land just one good hit on the vice principal. Shin-hyuk explained that this was why he got the wild ginseng. He just needed to be strong enough to land one shot of sword ki on the vice principal. The master questioned why he was only aiming for one shot, especially as the world's only martial artist. But Shin-hyuk told him to stop, saying he had no idea how strong an S-rank hunter really was. The master scoffed, saying that back in his day, transcendent level fighters were a dime a dozen. He got annoyed that Shin-hyuk didn't seem to believe him. As the master continued, Shin-hyuk thought to himself that if so many people were at that level, then it couldn't have been that common. Shin-hyuk tried to change the subject, saying he just needed to land one hit, even if he lost. The master sighed, telling him that with an attitude like that, he'd never make it. The old man asked him a pointed question. Did he really feel nothing about training with the assumption that he was going to lose? He was getting angry now. He couldn't believe some transcendent level nobody was offering to accept defeat after just one hit. He said if it were him, he'd be so insulted that one hit would never be enough. He clarified that he wasn't telling Shin-hyuk to beat him, just to land one effective hit. But the more he thought about it, the angrier he got. He looked down at Shin-hyuk and admitted that now he was pissed off too. Suddenly, it all clicked. The master's anger wasn't about his lack of pride. It was because the vice principal was the one who offered to accept a single hit in the first place. It wasn't about winning or losing. He realized he was letting his opponent's standard become his own limit. He looked at his master with new resolve. He admitted he'd been looking at it all wrong. He wasn't just going to hit the vice principal once. He was going to hit him at least 5 times. The master just smirked. He teased him, saying that 5 hits was barely a passing grade. Shin-hyuk asked why he was being so tough. The master grinned and told him to follow. He said now that Shin-hyuk had reached the peak level, he would make sure he got a perfect score. Shin-hyuk was confused, asking what he meant. The master explained that he was hesitant to teach this before because the technique wasn't his own. Shin-hyuk asked him to explain. The master said that back in his youth, he met countless people, but only 2 ever became his close friends. He told Shin-hyuk that the technique he was about to learn belonged to one of them. Shin-hyuk was stunned, wondering if friends really shared their secret martial arts with each other. The master explained that you never pass on your techniques to anyone but a disciple. He said he learned this one just by fighting his friend over and over again. Shin-hyuk listened as the master added that in the Morim, stealing another's martial arts was a huge crime. Shin-hyuk figured that since his master was the only one left, the old rules didn't apply. He asked if the friend was as strong as him. The master just said the guy was decent, then unleashed a powerful wave of energy to demonstrate the technique. Shin-hyuk was so excited, he begged his master to teach him right away. The master agreed, telling him to use this new power to completely crush the vice principal's pride. 1 week later, Shin-hyuk was meeting with someone. She asked him what was so important, since he always kept his phone turned off. She joked that she wouldn't have been so distant if she knew he'd get rich from stocks. Then she got serious, saying she needed to talk to him about the drug they saw before. Shin-hyuk remembered it, the drug called Genesis they saw in Incheon. She confirmed it, explaining that her agency had intel that the Chinese were the ones selling it. Apparently, they'd also tried to sell it in Japan, but got caught. She decided it was best to share everything she knew with him. His colleague asked if the rumor about his sparring match with the vice principal was true. She then showed him her phone, explaining that it wasn't a rumor anymore. It was an official notice on the school system. He was stunned. On his phone was a notice from the school about selecting outstanding teachers for the semester. The notice stated that the outstanding teacher for practical subjects would be chosen based on the results of a sparring match against the vice principal himself. The application period was open until the end of the term. Below that was a list of the current applicants. The only name on the list was his. Shin-hyuk just laughed, realizing the vice principal must have thought this would scare him into backing out. She didn't understand why he would do this, especially when the mood at school was already so tense. He had no idea what she was talking about. She explained that during the morning meeting, one of the kids in her class showed up with his face completely messed up. The problem was, he wouldn't say who hit him. She continued, saying the boy just kept claiming he fell down the stairs, and none of the other students would talk either. After a moment, Shin-hyuk asked if she ever found out who did it. She let out in as if the answer should have been obvious. She told him it was Lee Ji-sung, the worst troublemaker in the entire middle school division. Just saying his name seemed to make her nervous. Shin-hyuk was stunned. Lee Ji-sung. This wasn't just some random kid. Lee Ji-sung was the main character of the novel he was trapped in. Choi Seora noticed his reaction immediately. She asked suspiciously if something had happened between him and Lee Ji-sung. He just stammered that he choked on something, trying to play it cool. She didn't buy it, but moved on. She explained that nothing happened to Ji-sung because his dad is the CEO of Hwajeon Electronics, and his grandfather is the chairman of the whole group. He's untouchable. She figured his family pulled some strings behind the scenes, making her look like a fool for even trying to do something. She complained about his awful attitude in class, wishing she could do something about him. That's when it all clicked for Shin-hyuk. This was 2 years before the main character of the novel would possess Lee Ji-sung's body. He was witnessing the delinquent failure era of the story's hero. He suddenly remembered that in the original book, Choi Seora really hated the main character. Now, it all made sense. He smiled and suggested that Ji-sung was still young and might improve with time. She scoffed at the idea, insisting people don't change. Shin-hyuk just replied that they do, when their soul changes. He thought about the soul that would take over Ji-sung's body in 2 years. That person was selfish and arrogant, but he would be the one to fix the terrible reputation the original Ji-sung had built. He told her she should be nice to the kid, because you never know what the future holds. She completely rejected the idea, warning him that he'd understand once that troublemaker ended up in his high school class. She grabbed his arm, warning him not to take Ji-sung as a student, but for Shin-hyuk, hearing the main character's name just made everything feel more real. She was so fed up with the kid that she just wanted the break to start. Changing the subject, she asked Shin-hyuk if he had any plans. Shin-hyuk mentioned the new teacher training. He said that if he was lucky, he might not have to go, but it wasn't confirmed yet. She asked how he could possibly skip mandatory training. He explained that the vice principal offered him a way out. If he becomes outstanding teacher, he's exempt. It clicked for her instantly. The duel against the vice principal was his ticket out of training. She shot up, asking if he was out of his mind. She reminded him his opponent was Kim Man-dong, one of the top 10 hunters. She didn't hold back, asking if he really thought a weakling like him could even land a single hit. She told him he was betting his entire vacation on this fight. He just took a calm sip of his drink and asked why she was jinxing him before the match even started. Suddenly, she leaned right into his face, getting so close it made him blush. He stammered, asking what she was doing. She looked at him seriously and said he'd really changed. The old him would have never accepted a challenge like this. He was too flustered by how close she was to even respond. She pulled back a bit, asking if people could really change that much. Shin-hyuk panicked on the inside, thinking he couldn't exactly tell her he'd been possessed. Time flew by. Soon, it was the day before the end of semester ceremony, the day of the duel. The students gathered in the stands, buzzing with excitement and gossip. The chatter in the crowd wasn't exactly supportive. They thought he was getting way too confident and judged him for not even graduating from a hunter school. They kept whispering, saying he didn't know his place trying to earn the outstanding teacher title. One student scoffed, saying it was the vice principal he was up against. He was sure Shin-hyuk was going to get completely crushed. Shin-hyuk could hear everything the crowd was saying. He saw one of his students getting angry on his behalf and told him to calm down and head up to the stands. But another student, Jin-soo, refused to leave. He said he had to repay Shin-hyuk for buying him pizza and begged to stay and watch from up close. That's when Shin-hyuk realized something was wrong. The announcement was only posted on the teacher system, so students shouldn't even know about it. He was sure the other teachers leaked it on purpose. They wanted him to get humiliated in front of as many people as possible, especially his own students. Shin-hyuk turned to Jin-soo and asked just how bad the rumors were. Jin-soo told him the other teachers were saying he was just pushing himself to become an outstanding teacher out of greed. But Jin-soo quickly added that he and the others knew that wasn't true. Shin-hyuk just smiled. For him, that was enough. But then he saw some of the other teachers holding a banner. They were cheering for him, shouting about getting another company dinner. His students were going wild, too. Seeing all of them there, cheering for him, he realized that even a little support meant a lot. Then, a shout went through the crowd. The vice principal had arrived. The entire arena started chanting for Kim Man-dong, calling him the strongest hunter. He raised his arms, soaking in the cheers. Shin-hyuk just watched, completely annoyed by the guy's smug attitude. The vice principal, S-rank hunter, walked right up to Shin-hyuk. He commented on the huge crowd and asked if he was ready. Shin Hyuk didn't back down. He accused the old man of advertising the fight all over town just to build up the pressure, but said he was ready for it. The vice principal told him to go all out if he didn't want to get humiliated. Then, to show his confidence, he offered Shin Hyuk the first move. Shin Hyuk was relieved. He knew higher ranks usually offered the first move, but it wasn't a rule. He'd been worried the vice principal would just attack him from the start. This was perfect. Everything was set for him to deliver a proper first blow. An official stepped between them to go over the rules one last time before the match began. The referee explained the special rule for the match. Because of the huge difference in rank, all Shin Hyuk had to do was land a single clean hit on the vice principal. If he could manage that, he'd win. When asked if he agreed to these conditions, the vice principal didn't even blink. He accepted immediately. Shin Hyuk agreed too, but then he made a strange request. He asked the referee to step outside the ring once the fight started, warning him that it might get dangerous. The referee started to protest, reminding them he was an A-rank hunter, but the vice principal cut him off, telling him to just do as Shin Hyuk said. With that settled, the referee made the official announcement for the duel to determine the outstanding teacher. He told them to salute each other. He shouted for them to take their positions. Shin Hyuk backed away, drawing his sword, while the vice principal stood his ground, ready. He blew the whistle, and with a final shout, the duel began. The two of them faced off. The air was thick with tension, as everyone waited to see who would make the first move. As he stood there, Shin Hyuk remembered a conversation with his master. The old man had handed him a wrapped blade. He explained it was a decent sword, a fitting weapon for someone who had learned his techniques. Back in the arena, Shin Hyuk drew the blade. He knew his only chance was this very first strike, the one the vice principal was letting him have. He took a deep breath, and a powerful blue aura erupted from the sword. The students in the crowd were stunned. They recognized it as an aura sword and couldn't believe it, since Shin Hyuk was only supposed to be a B rank. Aura swords were a technique for A rank hunters, which is why the students were so amazed. The other teachers, however, didn't seem impressed at all. The vice principal just scoffed, asking if an aura sword was all he had. Shin Hyuk's answer wasn't with words. He unleashed a massive blast of energy that flooded the entire ring. For the first time, the vice principal looked serious. The students in the crowd started whispering. Some thought it was an aura blade, but others argued it was impossible. That's a skill only S-rank hunters should be able to use. But Shin Hyuk knew exactly what it was. His master had called it a wasted technique that he'd never used in a real fight. The vice principal's arrogance, however, had just given him the perfect opportunity. Usually, the first free move is just a light test of your opponent, but Shin Hyuk was breaking that rule, pouring every bit of his energy into this single attack. The vice principal watched carefully. He could tell it was a real aura blade, but the long preparation time suggested Shin Hyuk hadn't fully mastered it yet. He told him to go ahead and attack whenever he was ready. Shin Hyuk apologized for the wait, but warned him that this wasn't over. He explained that this was a special martial art his master had learned, one with a pretty shocking name. He raised the blade high, revealing the technique's name, Heaven Demon Sword Art. One of the students was in total shock. Shin Hyuk's eyes narrowed as he told the vice principal he was coming. The vice principal's calm attitude was gone. He immediately got into a fighting stance, confirming that he knew exactly what the name Heaven Demon meant. As he brought the sword down, he explained that this martial art was created by one of his master's best friends, and that friend was none other than the legendary Grand Demon, the Heaven Demon himself. He remembered the day his master told him. His reaction was pure disbelief. He'd asked him if his friend was really the Heaven Demon. His master just calmly asked how Shin Hyuk even knew that name. Shin Hyuk was stunned. Anyone who'd read a few martial arts novels knew exactly who the Heaven Demon was. He was the absolute ruler of the demon sect, one of the two great powers that divided the entire martial world. Even in the novel Shin Hyuk came from, the Heaven Demon was a huge deal, a popular character known for his overwhelming power. The character was so famous that he appeared in all sorts of stories, from fighting dragons to opening a bakery. Everyone knew his name. His master admitted the Heaven Demon was famous, but then he added that he'd never once lost a fight to him. Shin Hyuk was still trying to process it. He remembered his master had two close friends. If one was the Heaven Demon, he had to ask who the other one was. His master described the other guy as some Taoist who was always rambling about Tai Chi and loved to drink. He said the man's name was Zhang Sambong, and he'd started some sect called Wudong or something. Shin Hyuk was completely speechless. The name hit him like a ton of bricks. Zhang Sambong wasn't just some old drunk. He was the founder of the Wudong sect, a grandmaster known throughout the entire martial arts world. Back in the present, his attack was building. The technique involved pouring aura into an already energized sword, then layering more and more on top until it created cracks in the blade itself. Those cracks were the key. They scattered countless shards of energy like a storm of meteors. The name of the technique was Meteor Annihilation Demon Steel. The blast hit the protective barrier with incredible force. The students watching could only stare in shock. The teachers maintaining the barrier were struggling to hold it. One of them yelled that they only had one layer left. She couldn't believe it. The triple barrier the vice principal had set up was almost completely gone. Two of the layers were already broken. She realized right then that she had been underestimating him the entire time. The teacher stared in disbelief. She realized that if she had been inside that arena, she would be dead. She had no idea what kind of move Teacher Kang had just pulled off. But one thing was clear. His rank assessment was completely wrong. As the dust settled, Shin Hyuk stood his ground. He was completely drained. That one attack had used up every bit of aura the sword could hold. There was no way he could use a technique like that twice. But he remembered what his master had told him. The raw power of the attack was top tier, strong enough to take down even high-level monsters. He looked over at his opponent and asked him what he thought. He stated that an attack of that level definitely counted as a valid hit. The smoke finally cleared, revealing the vice principal. His clothes were shredded, and he was covered in wounds. Vice Principal Kim Mandong was now in a very difficult situation. The vice principal watched from the sidelines. He had only promised Shin Hyuk one valid hit. After seeing his last duel, he already knew the new teacher was no ordinary B-rank hunter. He looked at the blood on his hand, completely stunned. It had been years since anyone had actually managed to injure him like this. Shin Hyuk just smirked. This was exactly what his master had predicted. In a world without true martial arts, a technique like his was basically unstoppable. The vice principal tried to brush it off, saying the first strike was over and now it was time for a proper match. But Shin Hyuk immediately cut him off, asking if he was really going to pretend that hit didn't count. He pointed at the vice principal's shredded clothes and wounds, asking if he was seriously going to argue it wasn't a valid hit. The older man couldn't even find the words to respond. Shin Hyuk reminded him that he had agreed to the referee's conditions. To be honest, this was as far as he ever planned to go. He'd bet everything on that first move. He counted the holes in the vice principal's clothes. That one attack had landed with the force of at least 10 hits. He'd done exactly what he told his master he would. The vice principal mumbled that it felt wrong to end the match when he hadn't even done anything yet. Shin Hyuk didn't miss a beat. He reminded him that he never asked for the first move. The vice principal was the one who offered it. The vice principal was cornered and stammering. He tried to guilt Shin Hyuk, asking if he really wanted to disappoint all the students who came to watch. But his plan completely backfired. The students just started cheering even louder for their teacher, shouting that he was the best. Shin Hyuk wasn't having it. He said he had no regrets. His goal was to stop anyone else from challenging him, and that was done. He told the vice principal to wrap it up. He stated plainly that since the hit was valid, he had won the duel. A nasty smile spread across the vice principal's face. He repeated Shin Hyuk's words, then twisted them, saying that if the hit wasn't valid, then the duel wasn't over. Shin Hyuk asked what he was talking about. The vice principal just ignited his aura, explaining that while he acknowledged his strength, he had a reputation to protect. He declared the challenge settled and said now they could enjoy a real fight. That's when Shin Hyuk saw it. The vice principal's wounds were closing. The bleeding had stopped. The students in the crowd went crazy. They recognized the skill immediately. It was super regeneration. They couldn't believe he was using such a broken ability in a simple duel. The vice principal just laughed it off. He flexed, showing his healed body, and said that since he was totally fine, the hit didn't really count. The students in the crowd were furious. One of them yelled out the vice principal's name, Kim Mandong, calling it a clear abuse of his S-rank power. Shin Hyuk watched, thinking the vice principal was destroying his own reputation. He asked him if he was really going to keep this up, pointing out how badly everyone was reacting. But the vice principal said he was genuinely interested in his strength now and wanted to continue. Shin Hyuk thought it was pathetic, but he knew he couldn't back down, or the other challengers would think he was weak. The truth was, his body was giving out. His legs were shaking, and he could barely get any strength into his arms. He was recovering, but very slowly. He knew he couldn't use that last technique again, and maybe not even the aura sword. Still, he believed this was the right choice. He thought about his master and about the student he was trying to protect. He couldn't just let this go. The vice principal didn't wait any longer. He told Teacher Kang that he was coming and charged forward. Instead of charging, the vice principal slammed his fist into the ground. The entire arena floor cracked and shattered, the force racing straight towards Shin Hyuk. The crowd was in disbelief. He had destroyed the entire arena with a single punch. But the vice principal wasn't done. He launched himself into the air, flying right over Shin Hyuk's head. Shin Hyuk watched, confused by the strange attack. Then he realized the truth. The vice principal wasn't aiming for him at all. He was going for the student standing behind him, glowing with a menacing blue aura. The vice principal brought his hand down for the final blow. Shin Hyuk looked up, his own eyes glowing red with fury. He threw himself in the way to protect the student. The vice principal's hand struck him down with incredible force. He woke up staring at a ceiling he didn't recognize. Slowly, he realized he was in the nurse's office. He thought for a second he was dead, that he was going to meet King Yomura again. So he really had been knocked out cold. He let out a long breath, covering his eyes. But as he thought back on it, he couldn't help but smile. He admitted to himself that the fight was actually exhilarating. He remembered the moment vice principal shattered the arena floor and then charged at him from his blind spot. In that instant, he remembered his master's mad dog spirit to sacrifice the flesh to cut the bone. So instead of blocking the terrifying fist with his sword, he used his own arm. The impact was immense, but it was the only choice he had. Even with his own bones breaking, he endured the pain and swung his sword, slashing the vice principal's arm. The cut felt like it was scraping away at his sins. And right before the final punch sent him crashing to the ground, he saw it. A small but definite sword wound on the old man's shoulder. It wasn't deep, but it was there. There was no way the vice principal could argue that wasn't a valid hit. He was getting that training exemption, even if he had to hunt him down for it. Just then, someone pulled back the curtain. A woman asked if he was awake. She was the school nurse. She told him he'd been passed out for about 4 hours, and that she was glad to see him awake. He was confused. He didn't remember a school nurse ever appearing in the original story. He quickly thanked her and apologized for keeping her from going home. But then, he looked down, suddenly puzzled. The nurse explained that his bones had been completely shattered. She'd healed them with magic, but it would be another 2 hours before he got any feeling back. He was amazed. He'd only ever read about this stuff in books. The nurse then added that the vice principal had specifically asked her to watch over him until he woke up. He almost let a rude comment about the vice principal slip out. He told the nurse, Yuli, that he was fine and she could head back to the dorms, but she just looked at him and said she didn't want to. He had no idea how to respond to that. She explained that her father had told her to leave when curfew hit, but she stayed behind on purpose. Then she just came right out and said it. She was interested in him. Shin-hyuk was completely floored, but he wasn't focused on her confession. He stammered, asking her to repeat the part about her father, hoping he'd misheard. Then it hit him. Yuli was the vice principal's daughter. He immediately started panicking, apologizing for calling the old man a geezer. Yuli told him she was already interested before, but watching him fight her father was something else. She said he was really cool, and she never imagined he'd be able to stand up to him like that. Shin-hyuk just laughed it off. He pointed out that since he was the one who passed out, it was officially the vice principal's win, but Yuli insisted he didn't really lose. She told him his first attack was incredible, and she was sure a lot of people felt the same way. He was surprised by how sincere she was, thinking she was nothing like her father. Then she held up a bag. She explained that students had left things for him while he was recovering. He looked down at the pile of envelopes in disbelief. They were letters. He started reading through them. One told him he fought well, and another invited him out for a drink when he recovered. He even recognized some of the names, like Humid and Mr. Park. One letter was a little over the top, calling him handsome and saying they believed in him. He mentally noted that this student was getting a 0 for his attitude score next semester. He held one of the letters, looking at the pile. He hadn't expected this at all. He read one of the letters, a simple thank you from a student. He couldn't help but smile. He realized that even though he lost the fight, this felt like a real win. This was enough. Yuli smiled, saying it didn't feel like a total loss anymore. Shin-hyuk agreed, but he was still a little disappointed about not getting that training exemption. She didn't know what he was talking about. He explained that the whole reason he accepted the duel was because of a deal. If he proved himself, he could skip the new teacher training. Yuli just laughed, finding his reason a little strange. She told him he should just go, insisting the training was actually fun. He shook his head. He explained that because he didn't graduate from a hunter school, he knew the other teachers would look down on him. It was the same reason he had to fight that first duel when he was hired. Yuli tried to reassure him, saying that not all the teachers felt that way. She admitted that being stuck in the nurse's office, she'd actually been really curious about him. She told him to look forward to the next semester. After that fight, she was sure no one would be stupid enough to ignore him, just because of where he came from. He smiled, joking that she was a pretty good counselor. Yuli insisted they become friends, and offered to write down her number for him. He joked about it, but he was actually glad. Even if she was the vice principal's daughter, he had made a good friend. The healing magic in this world was no joke. He recovered in a single day, just in time to attend the end of semester ceremony. At the ceremony, the announcer named the outstanding teacher for the first semester. It was Kang Shin-hyuk. He smiled to himself. Turns out, the old geezer actually kept his promise. Of course, not everyone was happy about it. One of the other teachers immediately protested, questioning how Mr. Kang could get the award when he didn't even win the duel. But he was quickly shut down. The reason was simple. Mr. Kang was the only one who had volunteered for the sparring match. That aside, something curious was starting to happen. He heard a voice call out to him, offering congratulations. He turned to see a few of the practical skills teachers approaching him. They were actually talking to him now, even if it was just a simple morning greeting. One of them even said it was a shame they hadn't gotten a chance to talk this semester. Shin-hyuk found it strange. He never thought their attitudes would change this quickly. The principal's voice came over the intercom, wrapping up the ceremony. Just like that, the semester was over. Right away, some of his students ran up to him. They were planning a beach trip for the break and wanted him to come along. They explained that one of their uncles ran a guest house on Jeju Island, but he held up a hand, turning them down. One of the students started goofing around, imitating him. He jokingly told the others that their teacher was busy and had a life. You know, the class laughed, and after a bit more joking around, they all wished him a great break. He finally had his vacation, something he felt he'd earned after that fight with the vice principal. That's when his phone buzzed. He looked at the message and smiled. He decided it was time to start a side job and make some real money. One of the students, Lee Jinsu, started acting ridiculous, begging Shin-hyuk to go with them. His classmate immediately told him to stop being disgusting. Shin-hyuk just clapped his hands to get their attention. He reminded them he was busy and officially dismissed the class, ending the semester. He finally had his vacation, something he felt he'd earned after that fight with the vice principal. That's when his phone buzzed. He looked at the message and smiled. He decided it was time to start a side job and make some real money. See, he'd actually made a pretty successful investment in some election-themed stocks. But even with that win, he still needed to think about a side job. Turns out, his bank account was basically a bottomless pit. He was completely screwed. The loan repayments for his investment were way higher than he'd expected. After taxes, rent, and interest, there was almost nothing left. Taking out a loan for a long-term investment was smart, but now he needed cash. He had to work a side job to build up more money, and he looked at a message from Ms. Kim, wondering what his next move should be. The fastest way to make cash in this world was through a portal. He remembered the conversation he'd had the night before. While he was recovering in the nurse's office, Ms. Kim Seonhwa had told him about the other instructors instructor's vacation plans. She explained that most of the practical skills teachers did side jobs inside portals. The salary was decent, but the money you could make from a portal was on a whole other level. She figured that since he used to be a hunter, he already knew all this. But he didn't. Because he came from a non-hunter school, he'd only ever been treated like a porter. Ms. Kim was shocked. She couldn't believe they'd treated someone so strong as a simple porter. She told him that if he'd been in her party, they would have been desperate to have him. He just thanked her, a little lost for words. That's when she got an idea. She cheerfully suggested they go on a portal tour together to get to know each other better. She started to mention how much income they could make, and that's all Shin-hyuk needed to hear. He immediately agreed, shouting that he'd love to go. He was confident his bet with Kim Mondong was already won. If he could make a killing in this portal, he could buy some things to make his master happy. He was genuinely excited. He'd only ever read about portals in the novel. He started wondering what his other party members would be like. Since Ms. Kim was a mage, he figured they had to have a reliable frontliner. A solid tank was essential for any party. He was really hoping for a cool, bald-headed tank. That's when a woman with short black hair stepped forward and introduced herself as Hong Iseol. He got flustered, muttering about a bald guy before catching himself. He quickly tried to play it cool and say it was nice to meet her. Miss Kim jumped in, cheerfully introducing Iseol as her old friend and her father's #1 disciple. She explained they'd worked together for a long time. Iseol reminded Sonhwa that her master being her father was supposed to be a secret. Sonhwa just smiled, saying it was fine, and introduced Shin-hyuk as the guy who recently did so well in a sparring match with her dad. Iseol's expression changed slightly. She recognized him now as the one who supposedly landed a blow on her master. She suggested they could talk more while they moved. Ms. Kim offered to put his luggage in her car. Shin-hyuk just smiled and pointed to his sword, saying it was all he needed. Iseol didn't look convinced. She whispered to Sonhwa, questioning if he was really okay with no armor, but Sonhwa just laughed, completely unconcerned. Shin-hyuk could hear everything they were saying. Turns out, he was just as surprised. He'd been expecting some huge, muscular guy to be their tank, but instead, he got Hong Iseol. He knew exactly who she was from the novel, an A-rank hunter and future combat instructor at the academy. As Kim Mandong's disciple, she was a total powerhouse. He remembered reading about how she'd eventually be defeated by the main character, Lee Ji-sung, and end up falling for him. With that settled, they all got in the car and headed out. Iseol laid out the plan. They were hitting 2 portals today, one C rank and one D rank. She explained that even though her A rank status meant they could enter up to a B rank portal, they were going to play it safe. For the break, they wouldn't go anywhere higher than C rank. In this world, portals are divided into 5 tiers, from the highest S rank down to the lowest D rank. The difference in profit, even between a single rank, was huge. This was the reason hunters were always trying to push their limits. Shin-hyuk looked a little confused. He asked Iseol why they weren't going to a B rank portal today. Iseol immediately shot down the idea. She told him there was no way they were attempting a B rank portal, especially not with the gear he brought. They were sticking to C rank, or D rank. Shin-hyuk sighed, saying it would be hard to make the kind of profit he was hoping for. Sonhwa just smiled and told him that while his skills were good, it was best to listen to Iseol on this. But Iseol was getting annoyed. She thought Shin-hyuk was being arrogant, talking about profits in a high-rank portal without even bringing proper gear. She figured he was exactly the type of person who causes accidents. She decided she needed to teach him a lesson, if only for the sake of safety training. She turned to him with an idea. Since profit was so important to him, she had a proposal. The challenge was simple. Clear the D rank, 4-person portal, all by himself. If he could do it, he could keep all the profit. And after he proved his skills, she said she'd consider a C-rank portal. Shin-hyuk's face lit up. He immediately accepted, saying he'd be grateful for the chance. Iseol couldn't believe it. He didn't even hesitate for a second. Iseol was sure this would be a reality check for him. Even though it was 2 ranks below his own, a 4-person dungeon wasn't a joke. She wanted him to struggle and finally learn his limits. At the checkpoint, Iseol presented her A-rank hunter ID to the guard. After confirming her identity, he waved them through. She explained that her B-rank companion was going in first, all by himself. She and Sonhwa would just be the rear party, standing by as backup. Shin-hyuk stepped out of the car and got his first good look at the D-rank portal. It was a swirling blue gateway, humming with energy. For some reason, he had a weird thought that a legendary swordsman might be sitting inside, just eating cup noodles. Iseol laid out the final rule. He had 1 hour to clear it. If he couldn't, she and Sonhwa would come in to help. Shin-hyuk just smiled confidently and told her to leave it to him. He was actually thrilled. This was the perfect chance for him to get real combat experience against monsters. He also thought to himself that Hong Iseol was way more reasonable in person than she was in the novel. Iseol just stared at him, completely baffled. She couldn't figure out what that pretty boy had to be so happy about. Sonhwa was worried, reminding him that even a D-ranked dungeon for 4 people was tough. Shin-hyuk just gave her a thumbs up and said he'd see her in an hour. He wasn't just being arrogant. He remembered from the novel that this was the same type of portal the original protagonist, Lee Ji-sung, cleared for his first training mission. If Ji-sung could do it, he was sure he could too. Plus, the martial arts he'd learned for that duel had already reached their peak. He only wanted to be strong enough to protect himself, but it felt like he was getting dragged further and further away from the quiet life he'd planned. He figured this was just part of his new life as the Academy's swordsmanship instructor. This was him finally adapting to this world. With that, he stepped into the glowing portal. He felt a strange pull, and then everything changed. He stepped out on the other side, looking around in awe. He'd heard that portals could lead to anywhere, even a desert or a place filled with lava. But this place was incredible. It was a huge, dense forest stretching across mountains. Turns out, this was the most common type of portal environment. He stood at the edge of a glowing blue circle. This was the safe zone. The moment he stepped out of it, he could be attacked at any time. He sat down and thought about what he was up against. Based on what he remembered from the novel, this kind of mountain area was usually full of animal or rock-type monsters. He decided to find the closest ones first. He closed his eyes and started to focus, gathering his energy. He remembered his master's lesson. To find an enemy, he had to spread his ki sense in all directions. The only problem was that a skilled enemy could use it to find him too, but it was the best way to locate someone without asking around. A moment later, he felt something. Down in the forest, he sensed 3 presences. He stood up with a grin. Back when he was training, he was always the one being chased, but this time, he was the hunter, and the thought was actually pretty exciting. Without wasting another second, he pushed off the edge of the cliff. He dove straight down into the forest below, ready to start the hunt. He remembered his very first time entering a portal in this world. The first thing he ran into was a creature with white fur and blue horns. It let out a piercing scream the moment it saw him. It was a D-rank portal, meant for 4 people. He didn't hesitate for a second and charged right in. He recalled the details of the monster. It was about the size of a man, and it was fast. They were good at climbing trees and had a terrible scream. He figured they were basically just giant monkeys. The creatures were called giant monkeys. Shin Hyuk remembered that they were weak for their rank. The problem was, they rarely dropped mana stones, so most hunters didn't bother with them. He also knew from the novel that their leather was valuable, but they were so fast that trying to catch them was a huge pain. One of them lunged straight at him, but Shin Hyuk just grinned. That was only a problem for regular hunters. And he wasn't a regular hunter anymore. He moved like lightning, cutting the creature down in a single motion. He looked down at his blade, a smile creeping across his face. He remembered the mana stones from these things sold for 300,000 won each. He started wondering just how much money he was about to make. This was way better than a normal school vacation. For the first time, he felt a real thrill. The other monkeys saw what happened and started screaming. They weren't ready for a hunter this strong. Turns out, these giant monkeys are pretty smart. When they realize an opponent is too strong, they don't fight. They just climb a tree and run. Their leather is thick enough for armor, but they're so fast that chasing them is almost impossible. For an ordinary D-rank hunter, that combination would be a nightmare. But for Shin Hyuk, this portal was turning into his own personal hunting ground. As he took them down one by one, he was already thinking about the money. He knew their leather was expensive, and having a whole portal to himself was going to be incredibly profitable. But then, the reality of it all started to sink in. He realized that cutting down monsters himself was actually pretty sickening. They were way more disgusting in real life than they were in the novel. That's when some of the monster's blood splattered right across his face. The feeling was too much. He couldn't hold it back. He emptied his stomach right there on the forest floor. In the dead monster's eye, he could see his own reflection. The feeling of the blood, the smell, it was all too real. But he didn't stop. Even while fighting off the urge to get sick again, he kept cutting through the monsters. He knew he had to get used to it, the sight and the awful smell. This was just the first step. He pushed forward, thinking of Hong Isiol. He promised himself he'd be back soon. But outside the portal, something was wrong. A couple of guards were standing watch when one of them noticed a change. He turned to his superior, Sergeant Kim, and told him the portal looked strange. It was definitely blue when they left for lunch, but now it was a dark navy. The sergeant's eyes went wide. A navy blue portal meant one thing. It had become an A-rank gate. The guards stared at the portal. They were screwed. The sergeant was furious, demanding to know how long the portal had been like this. The younger guard stammered that he'd just seen it himself. He panicked, remembering the hunter who had gone inside just a little while ago. The subordinate asked if they should go in to check the safe zone, but his superior shot that idea down immediately, calling him an idiot. If the safe zone was gone, walking in there would be a pointless death. He reminded the younger guard that they weren't hunters. All they could do was report it. An A-rank portal like this would need at least 4 hunters of the same rank to even stand a chance. The sergeant made the call to report the situation. The person on the other end couldn't believe what they were hearing. The news reached 2 women, and one of them, Kim Byonhwa, started to panic. She yelled that they had to find Mr. Kang and get him out immediately. But the other woman, Isiol, tried to calm her down, saying they needed to report it first. Byonhwa couldn't understand how calm Isiol was being. She reminded her that this was an A-rank portal now. Even Mr. Kang couldn't handle that kind of threat alone. Isiol grabbed Byonhwa's arm, forcing her to stop. She told her to calm down and think. She reminded her that there's a reason portals mutate like this, even if it's rare. Isiol explained that there are 2 ways a portal can evolve. The first is when the monsters inside start hunting each other. She said that in those cases, the portal's difficulty doesn't usually jump up too much. But then she brought up the second reason. Portal can also evolve when the monsters inside start preying on the hunters who enter. When that happens, the monsters can take on the traits of the hunters they've eaten. This can create completely new and dangerous creatures that no one has ever seen before. Isiol admitted that this second scenario is always way more dangerous. She hesitated, but the implication was clear. She believed Mr. Kang was probably already dead. Seeing the look on her friend's face, Isiol told her not to worry. She tried to sound hopeful, saying she was sure it was just monsters fighting each other. But she also pointed out that Mr. Kang King had been inside for over an hour, and she was just unrealistic. But Manhwa was filled with regret. She blamed herself completely, saying she never should have let him go in alone. She had always preached about safety, yet she was the one who got careless. Isiol made up her mind. She told Manhwa that if she was coming, she had to wait in the safe zone at the entrance. Isiol said she was fast enough to search for Mr. Kong on her own. Manhwa was moved by her friend's bravery. She clenched her fist, thinking to herself that this was exactly what her master would have done. Isiol gave her friend a final, stern warning. She said if Manhwa got stubborn, once they were inside, she'd knock her out and drag her out herself. She made her promise to retreat the second it looked hopeless. A guard tried to stop them, asking if they were really going in after seeing the state of the portal. But Manhwa was firm. She told him she had to at least confirm if Mr. Kang was alive or dead, and demanded he authorize their entry. The guard was clearly worried, saying it was too dangerous to go in now, but his partner simply told him to grant them permission. The guard watched them go, recognizing one of them as Hong Isel, Kim Mondong's disciple. He thought she could probably handle it, but he couldn't shake the worst-case scenario, that Mr. Kang had already run into the boss monster. He knew it took at least 2 strong hunters to defeat the boss of an A-rank portal. The possibilities were terrifying. A giant spider, a massive snake, or even an ancient orc. And if he was really unlucky, he could have run into an ogre, the so-called nightmare of the forest. As the 2 women stepped through the shimmering gate, Manhwa could only pray that Mr. Kong was safe. But deep inside the portal, Mr. Kong was anything but a victim. He stood over the remains of another monster, realizing he'd chased his targets much farther in than he'd originally planned. He casually estimated he'd taken down about 50 creatures so far. Since there was no sign of the portal clearing, he knew exactly what that meant. There was a boss mob waiting for him somewhere. He knew that when all the monsters in a portal were defeated, the sky would turn yellow. Since it hadn't, there was definitely a boss monster hiding somewhere. But something about this was weird. This was supposed to be a D-rank portal, so why was there a creature here that should have been in an A-rank portal? He knew exactly what it was. The system confirmed it. An ogre, the monster known as the nightmare of the forest. The danger was off the charts. The system explained that if 3 A-rank hunters fought an ogre, 1 was guaranteed to die. It would take a party of at least 5 just to stand a chance. Shin Hyuk knew all of this from the novel. He remembered the original protagonist had a tough time fighting one. Of course, that was an even stronger, 2-headed ogre from an S-rank portal. He figured he could probably win a fight against 5 A-rank hunters. But the ogre's presence was on a whole other level, and one-on-one fight was definitely dangerous. The system began to explain why. An ogre's hard bones and powerful muscles gave it incredible speed. The system continued its warning. Not only was the ogre fast, but its hide was so tough that a sword could barely even scratch it. The creature easily blocked his strike, the blade just scraping uselessly against its skin. The impact sent him flying backward, skidding across the ground. He looked up, stunned. The system confirmed his fears. This monster was on a completely different level, even down to the rank of its mana stone. As the ogre slammed its fist into the ground, shattering it, the system gave him one last piece of advice. Don't even think about fighting it until he mastered a skill like Aura Blade. Shin Hyuk stared at the crater. He was in disbelief that a single punch could do that much damage. A grin spread across his face. The system was trying really hard to talk him out of this. That just made him wonder how valuable the ogre's mana stone really was. The answer appeared, 10 million won. As he stared up at the towering monster, Shin Hyuk realized the prize was just as big as the danger. He couldn't even get the words out. 10 million. His hand tightened around the hilt of his sword. That kind of money was worth any risk. His mind started racing through his abilities. He had the heavenly demon sword art, the incredibly fast meteor technique, and his most powerful move, the exploding blood demonic Kai. A crazy smile spread across his face. The system told him to run, but he was done listening. Meanwhile, someone else had just left the safe zone. Hong Isol was running as fast as she could, diving deep into the forest. It didn't take long for her to find what she was looking for. The bodies of giant monkeys were everywhere. The bodies weren't just scattered randomly. They formed a clear path, a trail of destruction from a massive fight. She followed the trail until she found something strange. She knelt down, confused by what she saw on the ground. Her mind immediately jumped to instructor Kang Shin-yuk. She imagined the fight must have been so brutal that it made him sick, and she instantly regretted not coming with him. But then she stopped. Looking at the scene again, she realized something was off. Her first thought didn't make any sense. Every single monster she had passed had been killed the same way. The cuts were perfectly clean, almost surgical. She knew these giant monkeys. They were fast, tough, and always hunted in packs. Taking even one down with a single strike was incredibly difficult, even for her. She couldn't understand it. A B-rank hunter with a cheap sword shouldn't be able to do this. The only explanation was that he'd used an aura blade, but that didn't make any sense. Then it hit her. This wasn't a trail of someone being chased. This was the path of a hunter chasing his prey, but that just made things more confusing. If he was that strong, why did he get sick? Suddenly, a massive foot slammed down nearby. A deafening roar echoed through the forest. The sound was so powerful, it shook the trees around around her. Just a moment ago, seeing the dead monkeys had made Hong Isiol feel relieved. She thought the danger was over, but that hope was gone in an instant. Hearing that roar, she knew exactly what it was, and she was sure Kang Shin-hyuk was dead. It was an ogre, the nightmare of the forest, a monster known for taking down A-rank hunters. She knew that most hunters would freeze in fear just from hearing its roar. Even if they managed to run, it wouldn't make a difference. The creature was so fast, it could crush trees as it ran, easily hunting down even the quickest giant monkey. She came to a grim conclusion. Instructor Kang was already dead. The ogre probably knew she was here too. She had to get out. But then she heard it again. Another roar. She tried to reason with herself. Sometimes ogres just roar for no reason. But what if that sound meant a fight had just started? If that was true, then Instructor Kang was still alive. She knew it was insane. It took 5 A-rank hunters to fight that thing, and her help wouldn't change the outcome. But she ran anyway. Hong Isiol ran, questioning her own decision. She knew the smart move was to head back to the portal and get to safety. She considered the possibility that the ogre might chase her. But back at the safe zone, Kim Seonhwa was waiting. Together, they could have made it out alive. But if she turned her back on Instructor Kang now, she knew she'd never be able to look Seonhwa in the eye again. She had to laugh at herself. After all her talk about being safe and logical, she was being a total hypocrite. She screamed his name into the forest, hoping for an answer. Suddenly, something threw her off balance, sending her tumbling through the air. She looked up and saw it. In the distance, Instructor Kang stood with a glowing blue sword. Her eyes widened. It was an aura blade. Watching him, Isiol was completely frozen. The way he moved with that glowing sword, it was like something out of a dream. He swung the blade, and a huge wave of blue energy just exploded outwards. To her, it was the most amazing thing she'd ever seen. The ogre let out a terrible scream as the attack slammed right into it. An ogre's skin is supposed to be almost impossible to cut, but that blue blade was tearing through it like it was nothing. She remembered Seonhwa telling her about this, but she never really believed it. Now, seeing it with her own eyes, there was no doubt. That was an aura blade. Just then, she heard his voice. He sounded surprised to see her, wondering why she wasn't outside the portal yet. He said he didn't think he took that long. He just smiled and waved, explaining that he'd run into a big monster on his way back. Isiol couldn't believe it. After a fight like that, how could he be so calm? Isiol was still trying to process what she'd just seen. She stammered, asking how he did it. Shin-hyuk casually asked if she was talking about the ogre he'd just killed. She told him to forget the ogre. She wanted to know about the aura blade. He just smiled and explained it wasn't perfect yet, claiming he only managed to pull it off because he was caught off guard. She finally understood why he'd suggested a low-rank portal. She muttered to herself that this place had clearly mutated into something way more dangerous. But Shin-hyuk was already thinking about the money. He wondered out loud how much he could get for selling the ogre's parts. Suddenly, he got sick. Isiol just stared, realizing that for all his power, he just had a really weak stomach. The sky turned yellow, signaling the portal was cleared. As Shin-hyuk complained about feeling sick, Isiol told him it was time to call for the recovery team. But before they left, he asked her to wait a second. He then made a strange request. He asked if she would mind telling everyone that she was the one who caught the ogre. Isiol was stunned, asking why he would give away the credit for something he worked so hard for. He explained that he just didn't like standing out. If word got out that a B-rank hunter like him took down an ogre, it would cause a huge commotion he didn't want to deal with. It suddenly hit her. Shin-hyuk knew exactly what he was up against, and instead of running, he chose to face that monster all by himself. She felt a wave of shame wash over her. She finally looked at him and admitted that she was the reckless one, not him. She apologized for judging him based on her first impression. She agreed to his strange request, figuring he had his reasons for not wanting to stand out. She would tell everyone that she was the one who dealt with the ogre. Then she held out her hand, telling him she looked forward to working with him for the rest of the break. Shin-hyuk looked at her hand, a little surprised by the offer. He smiled and shook it, saying he was looking forward to it too. The only problem was what he was still holding in his other hand. Isiol was completely grossed out. As she tried to pull her hand back, Shin-hyuk just grabbed her, not letting her go. With their deal settled, the sky turned a bright yellow. Shin-hyuk told her it was time to go get their payment. The system confirmed it, and the portal was officially cleared. She just stood there for a moment, taking it all in. Her mind was still racing from everything that had just happened. When they finally got out, he saw his friends waiting for them. He smiled and waved, relieved to see they were safe. He thought it was a strange turn of events. He really wasn't expecting this kind of welcome. The moment Sunhwa saw him, she threw her arms around him. Behind them, Isiol just kept bowing, apologizing over and over. He was just trying to figure out what was going on. It wasn't until they explained everything that it all made sense. They thought he had died when the portal mutated. He was still surprised, though. He wondered if he would have done the same thing in their shoes. After hearing that monster's roar, they still ran back toward the danger to find him. He realized they were more loyal than he'd given them credit for. He smiled, patting Isiol on the head. He apologized for worrying them and thanked them for coming back to check on him. He was just glad everyone made it out okay. With the fight over, Isiol asked how they should handle the monster's body. Shin-hyuk admitted it had been a while since his last hunt, so he figured they should just use her contact. He stepped out of the portal and took a deep breath. The fresh forest air felt good after being inside. He was thinking about how different the air always felt inside a portal, but then he stopped. He saw a line of military trucks waiting right outside. He had no idea what was going on. A soldier in full gear walked up to him and demanded to know if he was Kang Shin-hyuk, the B-rank hunter. Shin-hyuk confirmed it was him and asked what this was all about. The soldier explained that they'd gotten a report that the D-rank portal had mutated into an an A rank. His unit was sent by the Hunter Bureau as backup. He continued, saying that 2 other hunters had already gone in for a rescue. He asked why Shin Hyuk was the only one coming out, wondering if he was the sole survivor. That's when it clicked for Shin Hyuk. They thought everyone inside had been wiped out. Shin Hyuk calmly told him that everyone was safe and the portal had been cleared. The soldier was stunned. He couldn't believe what he was hearing, that they had actually cleared an A rank portal. Shin Hyuk just grinned and asked the soldiers if they really thought he'd lie to them. Then he started dragging something huge out from the portal. The moment the lead soldier saw what it was, he panicked. He screamed that it was an ogre and ordered his entire unit to get ready to fire. But before they could shoot, a voice yelled out for everyone to calm down. It was Isiol, sitting right on top of the monster's head. She announced that she was an A-rank hunter and that all 3 of them were safe. The soldiers just lowered their guns, completely confused. The soldier was still trying to wrap his head around it. He couldn't believe that just 3 hunters had managed to bring down an ogre. He told Shin Hyuk the body was stuck and they'd need to send someone back in to cut it loose. The other soldiers were just staring, shocked by how massive the creature was. One of them whispered that he'd only ever seen an ogre in training simulations. They remembered hearing it takes at least 5 A-rank hunters to beat one, but then they figured it made sense, since Isiol was the student of the famous Kim Mondong. One of the soldiers admitted that when Shin Hyuk walked out first, he thought he was the one who killed it. The other guy just scoffed and told him to get his eyes checked, pointing out Shin Hyuk's smug, pampered-looking face. The soldiers looked at the ogre's body. They just couldn't believe Shin Hyuk could have caused those kinds of wounds with a sword. They figured he must have helped out, but Isiol had to be the one who did the real damage. Shin Hyuk was just glad they were buying it. The plan was working perfectly. He knew if his new sword technique hadn't worked, things could have gotten really ugly. Soon enough, the recovery company they called showed up. Turns out, it was a team Isiol had worked with several times before. The man in charge was impressed. He asked Isiol how she managed to keep the giant monkeys in such perfect condition. But when he looked at the ogre, he noted it had been completely shredded. Isiol just played it cool, saying things just sort of worked out that way. Then she got straight to the point and asked him how much he could offer for everything. The man looked over the giant monkeys and made an offer of 1.6 million won. Shin Hyuk couldn't believe it. That much money from one run was insane. He then turned his attention to the ogre. He explained that while the bones were usable, the hide was too damaged to be worth much. Because of the damage, he said the best he could do was split the magic stone. Isiol thought the offer was a bit cheap. She turned to ask Shin Hyuk for his opinion, but he just stood there with tears in his eyes, completely overwhelmed. Shin Hyuk's hands were trembling as he did the math in his head. The number just seemed too high. Then he remembered to add the value of the magic stone on top of everything else. The grand total was 4 million won. For him, that was a life-changing amount of money. The recovery guy was confused, wondering why Shin Hyuk was so happy when Isiol supposedly took down the ogre. Isiol just told him to wire the payment directly to Shin Hyuk's account. Shin Hyuk had made tens of millions from stocks before, but this was different. 4 million from a single dungeon run was a true jackpot. Thanks to his teacher benefits, the money transferred instantly. Sunhwa looked at her phone, surprised. Shin Hyuk had decided to give both her and Isiol 10% of the earnings. Isiol immediately told him he didn't have to do that. She felt bad, insisting she had barely done anything to help. But Shin Hyuk insisted. He explained that after hearing what happened outside, it was the right thing to do. He was genuinely grateful they had worried about him and come back, so he wanted them to accept. Isiol still felt bad about the money, but Sunhwa tried to lighten the mood. She promised they had plenty of time left in the break and would definitely hunt with him again. Shin Hyuk smiled and told them not to overthink it, saying he was looking forward to their next hunt. As he left, Isiol just stared after him, completely lost in thought. Something about their instructor had clearly struck a chord with her. Later that day, back at home, Isiol was still completely out of it. Sunhwa had to call her name several times just to get her attention. Sunhwa asked if she was okay. She pointed out that Isiol had been acting weird ever since Instructor Kong left, barely saying a word or touching her food. Isiol brushed it off, saying she was fine. She just felt strange, making 400,000 won for just hauling bodies and driving, all thanks to Shin Hyuk. She admitted the unearned money was weighing on her, and she was thinking of returning it. But Sunhwa wasn't buying it. She reminded Isiol that for an A-rank hunter, that amount was nothing. She asked if that was really what was bothering her. Isiol didn't answer. It wasn't about the money at all. Isiol couldn't get the image out of her head. It was a devastating attack that tore the ogre apart in a single strike. She'd never seen a hunter do anything like it before. She finally told Sunhwa what was really bothering her. She explained that ever since she became an A-rank hunter, she'd hit a wall. But Instructor Kang, he might be the key she'd been missing to get stronger. Sunhwa considered it for a moment, then nodded. She thought Isiol might be right about that. Elsewhere, Isiol was talking with her master, Chu Yu Ryang. She told him she'd heard he and Sunhwa went on a hunt and that the portal had mutated. Her master told her that even as his disciple, she was nowhere near strong enough to fight an ogre alone. He said if anyone could, it was that Kong fellow, the only one who'd ever landed a solid hit on him. Isiol agreed, adding that it was hard to believe he was only a B rank. She also mentioned that he didn't seem to want anyone to know how strong he really was. Changing the subject, Isiol asked if the school still had an opening. Her master confirmed there was a position for a spearmanship instructor and asked why. She casually said she could probably manage teaching kids. Her master just smirked, finding it funny that she was suddenly so interested after he couldn't get her to even consider it for. Isiol teased him. saying he was enjoying this. She added that her guild contract was ending soon anyway, so the timing was perfect. She then made it official. Starting next semester, she would be the new spearmanship instructor. With a grin, she told him she was looking forward to it. At that same moment, I went to see my own master. I wanted to tell him about what happened. I was telling him how I sliced right through the vice principal's left arm. I saw it myself, right before I blacked out, but he didn't seem to be paying any attention. I asked if he was even listening. He just said he was. But then I saw it, a tiny smile. He was actually proud. I asked him to score my performance, and he just gave me 90. I couldn't believe it, but he just said I was too cocky. So I bowed and thanked him properly. His guidance was the only reason I survived. He joked that if I was really that grateful, I should have brought him some pork. I told him he should know me better than that. I had a gift for him. I was going to give it to him before the duel, but things got crazy. I handed it over, hoping he'd accept. He looked at the books, confused. I explained they were language textbooks, so he could study the languages of the outside world. My master seemed genuinely touched. He remembered telling me he was curious about the world beyond the snowfields. He then picked up the other gift, a big, heavy tablet, and asked what it was. I showed him how to turn it on. The moment the screen lit up, his mind was blown. He couldn't believe his eyes, asking what kind of magic this was. I clicked on a video file. On the screen, a pop idol started dancing to music. He was completely shocked. He started yelling at the tablet, thinking a real person was trapped inside and asking if she was all right. I had to explain that it was just a recording. He was waving at the screen, but I told him she couldn't see him. I explained that she was one of the most popular idols these days, kind of like a modern-day performer. He was still trying to wrap his head around it. Watching him, I started thinking. My master was a martial artist who had spent so many years all by himself. He might have gotten used to the quiet, but nobody is really meant to be alone. All those years must have been a constant battle against loneliness. That's why I wanted to bring the world to him. My master looked at the screen and commented on how much the world had changed. I told him that everything was different now, but that it was mostly wretched. He complained that even famous dancers couldn't afford a proper outfit. He shook his head, saying the world was rotten. I started to correct him, but he just laughed. Turns out, he was just kidding, pointing out the books and the computer mouse as obvious clues. My master looked at the laptop screen and admitted the outside world seemed truly dazzling. I had to agree, except for one small problem, the whole portal apocalypse situation. I told him that starting tomorrow, I was going to be pretty busy. All I had to do today was teach him how to use the laptop, and then I was heading out. He seemed surprised, asking if I was skipping my training. I just smiled and reminded him that real combat is the best practice. I was going to go clear out some monsters, so I sat down with him and started explaining the basics. I showed him the mouse and how moving it controlled the little white arrow on the screen. He listened carefully, taking it all in. My master just let out a little chuckle. He was clearly enjoying this. The next day, I met up with Sunhwa and Hongseol. Sunhwa spotted me and waved me over. I walked up and asked them if they'd eaten. Sunhwa said they already had breakfast together. I told them I'd eaten too, and since I drove, I offered them a ride, so we all got in my car and headed out. While we were driving, Sunhwa noticed something in the back seat. Isiol explained it was a collapsible spear she was planning on trying out. A spear? My mind went blank for a second. In the original story I read, Hong Isiol never once used a spear. This was a huge change. Sunhwa then reminded me that Isiol's specialty was close quarters fighting, but she also pointed out that the academy was looking for a new spear instructor, and suddenly, it all made sense. Sunhwa casually mentioned that Isiol was planning to apply for the spear instructor position. I froze. The spear instructor. That was the job that opened up after I beat Mr. Jung. But why would Isiol, a close quarters combat specialist, go for that spot? This was a huge change from the original story. I started to panic, wondering if I'd messed something up. Trying to sound casual, I asked Isiol why she'd made that decision. She paused for a moment before answering. She said she just figured working at the school would be nice, with paid time off and everything. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was an A-rank hunter who could earn a fortune from a single portal run. Her excuse was ridiculous. This was bad. I had to stop this. If a major character like Hong Isiol went off script, it could ruin everything. I tried to discourage her, pointing out that using a spear is tough for someone who doesn't specialize in it, but she wasn't worried at all. She admitted that spear hunters had an advantage in the exam, but she was sure she could manage teaching it at the academy. I tried one last time, reminding her that the teacher certification exam wasn't easy. She just smiled, saying it was fine because her A-rank status gave her bonus points. Then she added that she was only filling in for the semester. I couldn't believe it. Filling in? She explained that she was just a temp, trying out the job for one semester to see if she liked. If she found she enjoyed teaching, she'd take the exam properly and switch back to her main fighting style. A huge wave of relief washed over me. I had completely panicked for nothing. With that settled, Sunhwa changed the subject. She told us the portal we were heading to was full of undead monsters and that we'd get there around lunchtime. Then she asked if we wanted to eat first. I thought that sounded like a great idea. But then Sunhwa mentioned she brought a lunchbox, and Isiol said she had one too. My heart sank. If they were both bringing lunch, they could have at least told me. I hadn't packed anything, and we were heading into the mountains where there wouldn't be any stores. Just then, Sunhwa turned around. She told me she'd packed food for me too, and asked if there was anything else I wanted instead. I was completely stunned. She made one for me? I never saw that coming. In my entire life, I couldn't remember anyone ever packing a lunch just for me. Even on field trips as a kid, I never got a packed lunch. My parents would just leave some cash on the table, and that always felt like enough for me. Yahello just smiled. She told me I must have assumed it was just something between the two of them, and that they weren't so cold-hearted to leave me out. She playfully asked if they were really that hard to read. I was actually touched. I never thought I'd see a day like this. Manhwa mentioned she saw a park nearby on the map and had a picnic mat in the car. It sounded great to me, so we decided to stop there for lunch. The lunch boxes she packed looked amazing. He took a bite, looking completely content. But then he saw Yahello staring at him with this really intense look on her face. Her excitement was actually kind of terrifying. They were all having a good time, but this little break was almost over. Our real destination, a glowing red portal, was waiting for us. The moment we stepped inside the portal, the air turned cold. Manhwa looked excited, ready for anything. Yahello was focused, already preparing for a fight. Me? I was just trying not to freak out. Turns out the portal was swarming with undead, skeletons, ghosts, all the classics. We didn't waste any time. Yahello and I took the front line, cutting through them one by one. Manhwa provided support from the back with her light magic. After a few fights like that, I decided I was done with homemade lunches forever. For the next several days, this was our life, clearing one portal after another without a break. We took on several well-known B-rank portals, the kind that usually give parties a hard time. For us, it was just another day at work. And you know what? We actually started to work really well together. We were becoming a real team. Just as we were finally relaxing, Yahello got a call. She picked it up. It was her uncle, and from the look on her face, the news wasn't good. Yahello looked confused by the request, turning to me with an apology. The reason for her shock became clear a second later. It was an urgent call for an A-rank portal. She told the person on the phone that she'd need to check someone else's schedule, looking over at me for an answer. After getting my signal, she confirmed to her uncle that we could do it. And just like that, I'd hit a major turning point in my second life. After Yahello hung up, I asked her what was going on. I'd overheard her mention an A-rank portal, and that definitely got my attention. I told them if I could help, I would. Manhwa immediately agreed, saying that with me on their side, they could handle anything. But she warned that this job would involve a lot of travel. I asked what kind of job required so much travel. Manhwa explained that Yahello's uncle is the guildmaster of the Hwaran Guild, all the way down in Jeju. Turns out, something terrible had happened. Yahello explained that her uncle's guild took on an A-rank portal and got hit hard. They had a lot of injuries and even lost several members. Her uncle had asked if we could come down and help them out for about a week. He promised they would cover all our travel and living costs. I told them I was in, even without the perks. Manhwa was just as eager, saying she'd handle the magic and the food. I really wished she hadn't mentioned the food part, so I confirmed I could spare about a week. Yahello was so thankful she promised to treat me to something amazing. Manhwa, on the other hand, was still pouting because I didn't want her to cook. With the plan settled, we decided to head out the day after tomorrow. That would give us a full day to rest and prepare for whatever was waiting for us in Jeju. While I was thinking about the trip, I suddenly remembered that 2 of my students were also heading to Jeju. We wouldn't be hunting the entire time. I figured if our schedules lined up, maybe we could meet. The next day, I started packing. Socks, underwear, shirts. I went through the usual checklist. But then, a bigger problem came up. I had no idea if I could bring my sword on the plane. The original Kang Shinyuk's memories were no help. Just then, my phone rang. It was Sora. Perfect timing. I just asked her. She was surprised I picked up right away. I told her I was taking a break from portals, and then got straight to the point, asking if you could bring a sword on a plane. She told me that as long as I showed my hunter license, I could check it in as luggage. Then she mentioned she was actually about to call me anyway. She said it was about my license. Turns out, she'd checked, and it was close to expiring. She told me I needed to get it renewed as soon as possible. Sora warned me that if my license expired, I wouldn't be able to teach next semester. I looked at it, and she was right. I had less than a month. I was stunned and asked how she could have possibly known. She told me she'd gotten a call from Antas a few days ago. It was just a routine check-in, but my name had come up. I was confused. I thought things were completely over between me and Antas. But Sora reminded me that I'd made quite an impression, mentioning the YouTube video and my duel with the vice principal. I argued that the video was taken down ages ago for student protection, and the duel wasn't even filmed. She told me not to be so naive. She pointed out that the other hunters didn't just stop challenging me for no reason. Even without any footage, the students wrote tons of posts about it online. She said that most people don't believe a B-rank hunter could use Aura Blade. They think the kids exaggerated the story, or that the vice principal went easy on me. I asked her why Antas would still care if the story didn't even go viral. She explained that I'd still proven my skills, and since they're short-staffed, they're interested in me again. She went on, saying they even asked her to meet up with me, play nice, and try to talk me into coming back. I realized they basically wanted her to sweet-talk me. I panicked and asked if she actually said yes. Sora told me she'd just made up an excuse and brushed them off. But then, she added that she was a little worried they might not bring me up again after what she said. I immediately got a bad feeling and asked her what exactly she told them. I demanded she be honest. She confessed that she told them I randomly brought out a whip and asked her to hit me with it, and it didn't stop there. She also claimed I tried to sniff her socks and run off with them. She figured that would be enough to make anyone lose interest. She happily told me that after hearing all that, they completely dropped the subject. I was so relieved I almost cried. I just thanked her, because that was good enough for me. Sometime later, we landed at Jeju International Airport. The place was completely packed with people. I couldn't help but feel jealous of everyone on vacation. Iseol reminded me that once we helped the injured hunters, things would settle down. She told us to hang in there, and soon it would be our turn to relax. I asked if our first stop was the Warren Guild. Iseol confirmed it, telling us her cousin was supposed to be waiting for us at Gate 4. Just then, a voice called out, getting our attention. It was Hong Yesul, a C-rank hunter from the Hwaran Guild. She looked surprised to see Sunhwa with us. Yesul and Sunhwa greeted each other like they were best friends. It was pretty clear she was closer to Sunhwa than to her actual cousin, Iseol. Iseol introduced me, explaining that I worked at the Hunter Academy. I just gave a polite greeting. After introducing herself, Yesul looked me over and asked suspiciously if I was really an instructor. I just confirmed that I was. She immediately lit up, gushing about how handsome I was. She said she thought I was a celebrity or something. With the introductions out of the way, she told us to follow her so we could talk more on the way. On the way to the Warren Guild, Yesul told us everything that had happened. Turns out, last week, the guild's main squad entered an A-rank portal. Inside, they ran into 3 fully grown ogres. They managed to clear it. It was a disaster. One person died, and the vice guild master and the rest of the team were badly injured. One of them was so shaken, he was thinking of quitting for good. It was a grim reminder that even in a world with magic, some wounds can't be healed. No spell could fix the trauma of losing a friend in battle. This situation was worse than I thought. We were going to be a lot busier than I'd planned. Just then, Yesul announced we had arrived. I was blown away by the size of the building, asking if the whole place belonged to the guild. She just smiled and explained they only used the 7th to 10th floors. A man with bright blonde hair walked up, greeting Yesul with a huge smile. He called her his favorite niece, and she greeted her uncle. He laughed, joking that he wouldn't have called for help if things were going well. This was Hong Jong-sik, the guildmaster of the Hwaran Guild. The guildmaster then turned to Kim Sunhwa, asking how her father was doing. She replied that he was well and sent his apologies for not being able to come himself. Finally, he turned to me, calling me Instructor Kang. With a big, flashy smile, he welcomed us and told us to come inside so we could talk. Once we were settled in his office, he got right down to business. He explained that the portal they were dealing with was a B rank, meant for 7 people. He made it clear that his guild's policy was to always send bigger teams than necessary, just to be safe. But because they were short-staffed, he could only give us 5 members to help. Iseol immediately told him not to worry, saying that was more than enough. The guildmaster then asked for my opinion. I told him that honestly, 5 people felt like overkill. He looked completely shocked to hear me say that. I explained that our team had been working so well together that for a simple B rank portal, we probably didn't need any help at all. Of course, that wasn't the whole truth. The real reason was simple. More people meant smaller shares of the loot. The guildmaster seemed to find my confidence amusing. He then asked where I worked before I became an instructor at the academy. I told him I was with the Chase Guild. He noted they were a well-known group, then confirmed that I was a B rank hunter. That's when his friendly act dropped. He stared at me and said that at his guild, the Hwaran Guild, their B rank hunters have excellent teamwork. He went on, explaining that if a portal requires 7 people, there's usually a very good reason for it. He then made it personal. He reminded me that his daughter and niece were part of this mission, so he couldn't just listen to some outsider talk about making the team smaller. That's when Iseol started to panic. She knew how strong I was, but she realized her uncle just saw a cocky B rank hunter, and he had a bad temper. The situation was escalating fast. The guildmaster accused me of being arrogant, questioning if coming here with a couple of girls had gone to my head. He stood up and told me to come with him. It was time to knock some sense into me. It was a direct challenge. The guildmaster's daughter tried to step in. She asked him why he was being so aggressive with someone who came to help, but an older man with him immediately shut her down, telling Iseol to stay out of it. He said this was about the safety of their guild members. The guildmaster pointed right at me. He said if they were going to bring help, it should be someone reliable, not some clown. That was it. I drew my sword, and a powerful blue energy exploded from the blade. The guildmaster's eyes went wide. He realized this wasn't just an aura sword. It was an aura blade. This was the same energy I couldn't control during my match with Kim Mandong. But after clearing a few B-rank portals, I'd gotten much better at using it. Turns out, real combat is the best teacher, after all. The guildmaster was speechless. He asked how a B-rank hunter like me could have an aura blade. I just told him I picked it up along the way, and that it wasn't even perfect yet. The guildmaster's entire attitude changed in an instant. He admitted I wasn't just joking and apologized for acting so reckless. I explained that my team has only ever worked as a trio, so when I suggested a smaller team, it was really about keeping things safe and predictable for us. He let out in explaining that portals are appearing more and more. His guild is desperate for any hunter they can get, so someone strong enough to reduce team sizes is a huge help. That's when Lim Seol jumped in to back me up. She told her uncle to trust me, revealing that I'd even won a match against her dad recently. I tried to be modest, saying the vice principal went easy on me, but Kim Seonhwa quickly corrected that I won fair and square. The guildmaster's eyes widened. He suddenly remembered hearing a rumor about someone who'd fought Kim Mandong. He asked if I was the one who managed to land a clean hit. Kim Seonhwa confirmed it, admitting that maybe she should have mentioned that a little earlier. The guildmaster was completely baffled. He couldn't understand how a hunter with that kind of skill was still just a B rank, and he asked if there was some special reason for it. I just told him there wasn't some big story behind it. I simply hadn't met the requirements for the A rank promotion exam yet. Turns out, one of those requirements is clearing over 100 B rank portals. I explained that any missions I did overseas didn't count toward the total. So for this year, I just have to renew my license and try for A rank next year. The guildmaster seemed to understand. He muttered a saying about how standing out too much can get you in trouble. He told me to make sure I take the exam the moment I meet the requirements. Lim Sol thanked her uncle for understanding, but he wasn't done, calling out to someone named Yoon Suk and telling him not to relax just yet. He continued, saying that portals are real combat. Even if someone is strong, not meeting the A rank requirements means they still lack experience. He made his decision. He would assign 2 of his hunters skilled in support and local geography to our team, but that was as far as he would go. I immediately thanked him. I had to admit, leaders of major guilds are on another level. He saw that I lacked experience and made sure to give us the support we needed to make up for it. Thinking about it, our team never really had a set formation. Kim Seonhwa would just buff us with magic, and then Lim Seol and I would wipe out everything in front of us. Now Hong Yesul was joining as a guide and another fighter. I just wondered who the other 2 hunters from the guild would be. The 2 hunters from the guild showed up. The system identified them as Han Guangho and Lee Jihai, both B rank. Hong Yesul explained their specialties. Guangho was a fire-type magic user, and Jihai was an amazing sharpshooter. Guangho added that he would handle the terrain, since he could use detection magic to warn us about any dangers. That's when it hit me. Our entire party was made up of close-range fighters. The guildmaster must have noticed we needed someone who could attack from a distance. He might look flashy, but he was actually really sharp. With the team finally set, we all agreed to head inside. It was time to see how we worked together. We stepped through the gate into a huge, dark cave. Our guide immediately started explaining the terrain. She warned us that the cave was full of blind spots, but the real problem was the monsters. They were called Red Big Mouse, and they were the reason this portal had been left alone for so long. I suggested we just run it for 2 hours to get a feel for things. The new members agreed. They probably thought we were crazy for wanting a smaller team, but now they could see we were surprisingly good. The sharpshooter, Lee Jihai, warned everyone to stay alert. She said that now that they were outside the safe zone, the monsters could pop out from anywhere. Right on cue, a monster with glowing eyes lunged out of the darkness, but before anyone could even react, a blade flashed through the air. It was me. One clean strike and the creature was down. Jihai just stared, stunned by the speed of it all. Hong Ye-sol looked down at the dead creature. She admitted it was nothing like she'd imagined, saying she was expecting something a little more mysterious. Ye-sol teased me, saying I could have been a writer with an imagination like that. But Jihai wasn't laughing. She was still trying to figure out what just happened, realizing I hadn't even used any mana for that attack. The truth is, I had sensed the monster's presence long before it appeared, faster than any B-rank detection skill could have picked it up. These things were fast, and the cave made them hard to spot. Han Guangho, the fire mage, turned to me. He asked what I thought of the portal, and if there were a lot of monsters. I told him I was sensing a huge number of them, probably because it was a 10-person gate. He looked at me suspiciously and asked if I had a detection skill too. I just smiled and told him it was something like that. I said I'd provide cover, so they had nothing to worry about. Jihai admitted it was strange, being the one getting cover for a change, but she couldn't deny how amazing he was, and now she understood why he'd insisted on a smaller team. 2 hours later, Jihai was completely drained. She muttered that it was hard just to keep up with them. She asked Guangho how much further the main group planned to go. He guessed they weren't just scouting. They were trying to clear the entire portal in one go. While the support team was struggling, Kang Shin-hyuk was in his element. Hong Ye-sul was right there with him, cutting down everything in her path. Looking at the piles of defeated monsters, someone commented that for the first time, they actually felt sorry for rats. A system message popped up, confirming the B-rank portal was cleared. Jihai whispered to Ye-sul, asking if Shin-hyuk was really just a B-rank. Ye-sul confirmed it, but admitted she didn't know much about him, explaining that their oldest member was the one who brought him along. Guangho's head snapped around. He repeated the name, Kang Shin-hyuk, as if he'd just seen a ghost. Ye-sul asked if he'd heard of him before. Guangho admitted with a look of pure terror that he had actually challenged Shin-hyuk to a match once. Ye-sul just told him he was lucky to have survived. Meanwhile, the support team was worried about getting paid. They knew a run like this was worth a lot, but you only got a share if you contributed, and Shin-hyuk had done everything himself. Jihai let out a heavy, she felt like she'd just been watching from the sidelines the entire time. That's when Shin-hyuk announced, with a huge smile, that they would split everything evenly. The support team couldn't believe what they were hearing. Jihai spoke up, telling him they hadn't really done anything to earn it. She was so confused, she asked if it was some kind of special occasion. Shin-hyuk just smiled. He explained that without them, the team wouldn't have even met the minimum number to enter the portal. He said they trusted a stranger and came along, and this was the least he could do to thank them. Guangho and Jihai were completely moved by his words. Guangho just stared at him, calling him brother. Shin-hyuk barely had time to react before Guangho jumped on him, yelling his name. Shin-hyuk just shouted for him to get off. With that, a new team team was officially formed for the upcoming Jeju expedition. Later, Shin-hyuk was on his way somewhere, the car moving through the night. His phone buzzed with a new message. It was one of his students, reminding him that the trip to Jeju was just 2 days away. Then more messages started pouring in. They were all asking the same thing, begging him to come with them to Jeju. The messages just kept coming, one after another. Turns out, it was one of his students, Jin-soo, sending the texts from her room. She joked that the team had been fighting for 3 straight days, but their spirits were still high. They couldn't believe they'd already cleared 2 portals in a single day. With Shin-hyuk and Lee-seol leading the charge, the pace was just insane. One of the support mages mentioned she didn't even feel tired. She then turned to Shin-hyuk, remembering he had plans to see his students who were visiting Jeju. One of the women laughed and told him he should probably wash up before heading out. He was completely covered in blood. He smiled, feeling good about how well everyone was finally working together. He'd also heard that more injured hunters were returning, which meant they'd get a break soon. Gwang-ho walked over and asked Shin-hyuk if he needed a car to go see his students. Shin-hyuk just said he was planning to take a cab since it wasn't too far, but Gwang-ho insisted, tossing him his keys. He said he was just going to grab a beer and pass out anyway. Shin-hyuk gratefully accepted. With that settled, Shin-hyuk got in the car and headed out. As he drove, Shin-hyuk thought about how Gwang-ho's car would be perfect for taking his students around. He smiled, imagining how they'd freak out when he showed up out of nowhere. He decided to call them. One of his students answered, completely shocked that he was actually calling. He just laughed and told her he was on his way, asking if they needed anything. On the other end of the line, his students were going wild. The girl on the phone couldn't believe he was actually in Jeju. Shin-hyuk confirmed he'd been there for work all along and asked if they were all together. She explained that most of them were out sightseeing downtown. Only one student, Unseo, was back at their place because she was feeling sick and had stayed behind to sleep. The student told him they'd be back in about an hour. Shin-hyuk agreed that worked for him and asked what they wanted to eat. The answer was immediate and loud. One of the girls, Jin-soo, grabbed the phone and yelled that Min-hee wanted beef and that she wanted some too. The call was just a chaos of everyone yelling for beef. He thought to himself that beef should probably be classified as a dangerous substance. He decided he'd stop at a store for snacks and drinks first. But as he kept driving, he saw all the cars ahead had stopped. Something felt wrong. He wondered what was causing the massive traffic jam, thinking maybe there was an accident up ahead. But as he got closer, he realized it wasn't the police directing cars. It was soldiers. Something was definitely wrong. He pulled up to the checkpoint and asked the soldier what was happening. The soldier explained that a monster had escaped from a nearby portal during a subjugation mission. The hunters couldn't stop it, and the safety zone had completely collapsed. The entire area was now under lockdown. The soldier told him to turn around as soon as the road cleared. Shin-hyuk was pissed, wondering what kind of guild could have screwed up this badly. That's when it hit him. He remembered what his student said on the phone. Inseo was back at their place, all alone, resting because she was sick, and their lodging was right in the middle of this lockdown zone. He immediately asked the soldier how far the lockdown went. The soldier confirmed the entire area was restricted and asked if he lived there. Shin-hyuk explained that he knew someone staying in a pension there. He told the soldier she was resting after taking medicine, which meant she might be in serious danger if she hadn't gotten out. The soldier looked worried and suggested he try calling her. He quickly called Unseo. He had a really bad feeling about this, and his gut feelings were almost always right. She picked up the phone. He yelled into the phone, asking where she was. The soldiers just watched, confused. On the other end, Unseo sounded surprised, telling him she was in Jeju, obviously. He pressed her, asking if she was still at their lodging. She confirmed she was, explaining she had a fever and had been sleeping all day. Shin-hyuk's voice turned serious. He told her to listen carefully. A monster had escaped from a portal nearby, and she was likely the only one left in the area. She couldn't believe it. He warned her to stay inside no matter what, since the area was isolated to begin with. He told her the monster was a shadow reaper. He ordered her to turn off all the lights and make absolutely no noise. The soldiers' faces went pale when they heard the name. A shadow reaper was bad news. They were considered the terror of B-rank monsters. With their stealth abilities and high strength, they were incredibly tricky to fight. Shin-hyuk told her to stay out of sight and wait for him to arrive. But Unseo's voice was quiet and hesitant. She asked him to describe the shadow reaper, wanting to know if it carried a big scythe and wore a black robe. He confirmed it, joking that at least she paid attention in class. But she wasn't just asking. Her voice filled with terror as she told him she could see it. Right at that moment, Shin-hyuk was stunned into silence. She then explained that hiding wasn't going to be easy. He desperately asked what she was talking about. That's when she told him the worst part. It wasn't just her. Some of the other students hadn't made it out either. The shadow reaper stared down at its prey, its red eyes glowing in the dark. Hearing this, Shin-hyuk's face went completely pale. The students were frozen, trying their best to hold back their screams. The monster didn't care. It raised its massive scythe, ready to strike them down. Over the phone, Unseo's voice was just a whisper. She called out to her teacher as the monster stared her down. She begged him to get there as fast as he could. To make things worse, she told him she had a fever. She wouldn't be able to run for much longer. Shin-hyuk yelled her name into the phone. He couldn't believe the monster had already found her. He jumped out of the car and ran to the roadblock. He explained that he was a hunter and needed to get through immediately. The guard told him he had permission to pass, but it didn't matter. The road ahead was completely blocked and he'd have to wait. Waiting wasn't an option. Shin-hyuk simply pointed toward the woods, letting the guard know he was making his own path. But while he was racing against time, some of his other students were completely unaware of the danger, just enjoying their trip. Meanwhile, Guangho was relaxing with a beer after a tough week. He was surprised Jihye had joined him for a drink. She admitted she didn't usually drink, but after 3 straight days with the expedition team, she was exhausted. Guangho was thrilled with how much money he was making. That's when Jihye brought up the car he had lent to Shin-hyuk earlier that day. He explained that he'd just gotten it on a 36-month lease, but since Shin-hyuk was the reason he was making so much money, lending it was the least he could do. Jihye laughed, guessing that Shin-hyuk was probably on his way to meet his students, but he was actually pushing the car to its absolute limit through the woods. Shin-hyuk screamed, bracing for impact. The car went flying off the path. Back at the bar, Guangho raised his glass, completely unaware of what was happening to his brand new car. At that exact moment, in Jeju, the situation was already out of control. A Shadow Reaper, a B-rank monster, had escaped, and one of the students was right in its path. The car smashed through the trees, metal groaning with every impact. Shin-hyuk was going completely off-road, trying to make a shortcut. He barely had time to scream an apology to a tree before plowing right through it. The vehicle was being torn to pieces, but he just kept pushing forward, and Guangho just smiled, enjoying his beer without a single clue what was happening to his new car. Meanwhile, the Shadow Reaper raised its scythe, ready to finish the hunt. The whole situation was a perfect example of a lesson he drilled into his students. He told them to always remember that safety comes first, and then second, safety again. He warned them that acting recklessly with a hero complex just makes you a liability. Inside a portal, anything could happen at any time. That's when one of the students raised her hand. She asked what they should do if they're careful, but still end up facing a monster they can't handle. Shin-hyuk's answer was unexpected. He told the student to just copy his pose, one hand on her chin, the other on top of her head. Then he told her to twist hard for a quick ending. The student who asked the question looked furious, thinking she was an idiot for even asking. He quickly admitted he was just kidding. The real first step was to check out the situation, and then run for your life. He explained that knowing where to run gives you a better chance. He told them to always remember where their fellow hunters and safe zones were located, and that's why he made them run every single day. The students complained constantly, never understanding the reason, but now that training was the only thing keeping them alive. The Shadow Reaper swung its scythe with deadly force. Seo screamed as the blade missed her by inches. In that moment, it finally clicked. She understood that her teacher's endless running drills had a purpose. He was preparing them for this exact moment. The Shadow Reaper was known as one of the strongest E-rank monsters. For a first-year student, just being able to run from it was a miracle. Her friend held her tight, crying and asking why she had to be so reckless. She remembered someone asking her once why she wanted to become a hunter. Most people had a reason. They did it for the money, because it looked cool, or because it was a family business. But her reason was different. She was only there because her sister wanted to go to hunter school. Hearing this, her sister turned to her, confused, and asked why she wanted to be a hunter. She just smiled and said she was only there because she was following her. They both just stared at each other, completely baffled. Turns out, each one had joined just to be with the other. Her sister's voice echoed in her memory, asking if she really didn't remember what happened when they were kids. The memory was from when they were watching a show about monster attack victims. Little Seo had declared right then that she wanted to become a hunter to stop anyone else from getting hurt. Her sister had been so inspired by that moment that she decided to become a hunter herself, all to protect her little sister. Looking at the terrified kids, Seo knew she had a choice. She might survive if she ran away alone, but she could never face her sister again if she did. With her mind made up, she screamed at the others to run for a nearby building and hide. She was going to be the bait. She told them to hurry, promising to call her sister for backup. She took a deep breath and turned to face the creature, but it wasn't there. The monster had completely vanished. She looked around, confused. The monster that was just there had completely vanished, but she knew what it was. A Shadow Reaper. A creature so strong it takes 6 B-rank hunters just to fight it. The reason they're so dangerous is their stealth. They're completely unpredictable and can appear out of nowhere. Then she saw it, a flicker of movement in the dark. Her heart sank. It was hiding in the shadows. And just like that, the monster was right behind her, ready to strike. Suddenly, a bright light cut through the darkness. The creature barely had time to react. A car slammed into it at full speed. Shin-hyuk had arrived, screaming Seo's name. Shin-hyuk's voice cut through the chaos. He asked her if he'd ever taught her to close her eyes when facing a monster. The Shadow Reaper was pinned under the wreckage of the car, struggling. Seo looked up, completely stunned. She could only whisper his title. Turns out, just minutes before, Shin-hyuk was already piecing things together. While racing through the woods, he had sensed 4 different presences up ahead. 2 of them felt faint, so he guessed they had to be kids. But the last one was filled with a dark, evil energy. He knew, without a doubt, that was the monster. He realized what Seo was doing, drawing the monster's attention to save the others. For a second, he tried to calm himself down, remembering that she survives in the original story. But he couldn't be sure. His actions had already caused huge changes, like with Choi Sora and Hong Iseol. He was creating a butterfly effect, and he had no idea what would happen next. There was no time to worry. He closed his eyes and focused, trying to filter out everything except the monster's evil energy. His senses shot through the woods. He pushed past the trees, searching for the source. And that's when he found them. The monster was right behind her. Back in the car, he slammed his foot on the gas. He screamed Seo's name, pushing the car faster than it was ever meant to go. He was furious. He never taught his students to just close their eyes and give up when facing a monster. The Shadow Reaper swung its scythe, but Yunseo somehow managed to stop the blade. The monster paused, completely surprised by her strength. The scythe was completely blocked. In the distance, someone was racing toward them at full speed. It was Shinhyuk. He slid to a stop right in front of the creature. Unseo's eyes widened in relief. The Shadow Reaper, however, was enraged that its attack had been stopped. Turns out, Shinhyuk had caught the massive blade with his bare hand. He glared at the monster, his voice low and full of rage. He warned the creature that it had made a huge mistake by daring to raise a blade against one of his students.